Good afternoon. We'll now reconvene today's council meeting. There is no report from closed session. We need a resolution from council to open today's public meeting. Can I get a resolute mover and a seconder? Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. We'll go to 8.2, report building and planning. Matt Wilkinson with regards to 143 Elmdale Road zoning and bylaw amendment. Matt.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council and to the public, before you today is Planning Department Report number 2026-12. The report presents two recommendations that council receive and consider all comments related to zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA-04-26, and that bylaw number 2026-30 be approved to rezone the subject lands. The lands subject to ZBA 04-26 are currently zoned rural employment, rural, natural core, and natural linkage, as shown on map B5 to bylaw number 2018-58, as amended. Preliminary investigation of the site revealed that the existing zone boundaries do not match the boundaries of the natural features on site. Therefore, an environmental impact study was completed by Cambion in support of the rezoning. As drafted, bylaw number 2026-30 will realign the zone boundaries with the findings of the EIS and establish a suitable development envelope while protecting the natural features on site. It will also permit a limited amount of recreational use as a secondary use on the property. The recreational facility will be limited to 1% of the total lot area. The western portion of the property was not reviewed. As such, bylaw number 2026-30 will rezone the western side of the property with a holding provision. The holding provision can be lifted with the completion of an assessment in the form acceptable to council to demonstrate council's satisfaction that the proposed development will not negatively impact the natural heritage features on the lands within 120 meters of the lands. The assessment will also provide an area of wetland compensation for the wetland loss on the eastern portion of the property, as per the environmental impact study completed by Cambion, or any amendments of the study thereof. Lifting the holding provision will also require the completion of an archaeological assessment to the satisfaction of the province of Ontario, which has been undertaken by an archaeological licensed under the Ontario Heritage Act, and any significant archaeological resources have been conserved and removed and documented or for the preservation of the site to the satisfaction of the province. Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment application was circulated by first-class prepaid mail to all assessed persons within 120 meters or 400 feet of the lands affected by the zoning bylaw amendment application. Notice was provided by email to all township director department. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this better? Sorry about that. Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment application was circulated by first-class prepaid mail to all assessed persons within 120 meters of the land affected by the zoning bylaw amendment application. Notice was provided by email to all township director department directors, ministries, and agencies, and notice was also sent to County of Peterborough engineering and construction staff, City of Peterborough staff, Peterborough Airport staff, Ministry of Transportation, and Hiawatha First Nation, who requested notice by email. A sign was posted on the Elmdale Road frontage of the subject property, and notice of the public meeting was posted on the township website. The notice complies with the requirements of the Planning Act. Township staff have received comments from County of Peterborough Planning Department, City of Peterborough staff, Nexicom, Enbridge, and the Ministry of Transportation, who did not object to the application. County of Peterborough Engineering Construction Department staff have no objection to the proposed rezoning, but have requested that a traffic brief be conducted to confirm the intersection at North Monaghan Parkway and Elmdale, being a county road, is not impacted by the proposed development at the site plan stage. Oak Ridge Environmental have reviewed the submitted environmental impact study on behalf of the township and are satisfied with the proposed rezoning. Autonomy Conservation indicated that several streams and unvaluated wetlands and associated floodplain are present on the property. Autonomy Conservation is satisfied with the delineations of the flooding and the erosion hazards provided. The proposed natural core and natural linkage zones include the realignment of the flood and erosion hazards as they traverse the site, will keep the future development away from natural hazards. Therefore, it is the opinion of Autonomy Conservation that the application is consistent with Chapter 5 of the Provincial Planning Statement, referencing natural hazards. They also agree with the findings of the environmental impact study. Permits from the authority for the future proposed earthworks and development of the site will be required by the proponent upon the completion of the site plan approval by the township. Peterborough Airport staff note the development of the lands subject to the Peterborough Airport zoning regulations, SOR 94 123, and are located beneath the outer surface. Pursuant to the airport zoning regulations, no building, structure, or object, whether permanent or temporary, shall be erected or constructed that exceeds the limits established by the obstacle limit surfaces. The outer surface is an imaginary plane, which establishes a constant elevation of 45 meters above the airport reference point. The airport reference point elevation is 193.90.3 meters above sea level. Therefore, the outer surface elevation at this location is 235.3 meters above sea level, and all works have to be below that elevation. The Township Fire and Building Departments have no objection to the proposed rezoning applications and will continue to work with the developer through the site plan approval process and the building permit stage. The Township Public Works Department have reviewed the entrance requirements and have no objection to the proposed rezoning. Staff will review the grading plan, stormwater management plan, functional service plan, and details of the internal road as part of the site plan approval process. The Township Economic Development is in support of the application. The subject property has been vacant for quite some time, and the proposed development will create additional industrial warehouse space, which is greatly needed in the Greater Peterborough region. Additional industrial warehouse spaces also creates job opportunities for residents in the community. The proposed secondary recreational use gives the owner greater flexibility in the uses. It also provides residents in the community with access to required facilities that are beyond the township's ability to provide. Township staff have also received one email over the weekend from a neighboring property at 177 Elmdale Road who object to the proposed rezoning. They have requested that the letter be read into the public record. The letter lists a number of points that I will address in turn. Mark, could you please bring up the designation map?
Yeah, so this is an additional map, so we just need a motion to council to add the zoning map of the current designations to the report. Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Okay, Mark, now go ahead.
Thank you. So this is a map out of Schedule A, of the official plan, which shows the designations on the site, which is outlined in yellow. That's 143 Elmdale. As we see, 177 Elmdale is just to the south on the corner. Cisco is the big block at the intersection there. So the blue is designated rural employment. The light green is natural core, and the darker green is natural linkage. So these designations have been in place since the official plan came into effect in 2015. So I wanted to provide that context before I read the letter. Dear Mayor and members of council, we are writing to express serious concern regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 143 Elmdale Road. Our interest in this application is that my family and other residents chose this area for its quiet, rural character, clean air, peaceful surroundings, low traffic volume, natural environment, and agricultural setting. Historically, this area has consisted of rural and agricultural uses that are compatible with the community's peaceful nature. We are deeply concerned the proposed amendment, particularly the allowance of a recreational use, could significantly alter the character's ability and livability. According to the notice, a recreational facility may include a building or part of a building used for sport and recreation. Even as a secondary use, such a facility could generate substantial impacts inconsistent with the existing rural development. This is why I bring up this map. So since 2015, the site has been designated to permit industrial uses. So the rural and while the site has been historically used as agricultural, it has been in place to permit industrial uses similar to the areas to the north for 11 or so years. Point number 2, groundwater and private wells. Residents in this area rely on private wells, and for some, including our home, already experiences limited water pressure. A recreational facility may require washrooms, change rooms, showers, cleaning facility, or other water-intensive uses, which could strain local groundwater resources and affect water quantity, pressure, and long-term reliability. We note that in September of last year, residents were asked to provide water supply information to Campion for the stated purposes of assisting with a hydrogeological assessment to the area. To date, no information has been provided as to whether the assessment was completed or if or if it was, what conclusions were reached. We therefore call upon the township to disclose the results of the assessment to the residents. If no such assessment has been undertaken, we strongly urge the township to require a comprehensive geological study along with the independent peer review before any is granted. So yes, a hydrological study was conducted in support of the application. The information, the report is available for public use or for public review. If they asked for it, we would give it to them. The study concluded that test well number 1 could provide potable water on a sustainable basis to the entirety of the proposed development, and that the testing results, in addition to the local well records, indicate that there is viable groundwater supply in the area. So that was the conclusion. As the development moves forward into site plan, there may be more details required if we see that fit. Point number 3, traffic and road safety. Elmdale Road and surrounding rural roads are not designated for significant traffic increases or heavy vehicles. Recreational uses may attract cars, delivery trucks, buses, and service vehicles, creating safety concerns for residents, children, cyclists, pedestrians, agricultural vehicles, and property owners. We urge the township to conduct a detailed traffic impact study before any decision is made on this application. So traffic reports are typically completed at the site plan detailed design stage. But I'd point out that a traffic study assesses the amount of traffic and whether the infrastructure is suitable, whether we need a left-hand turn lane or an additional lane. It doesn't look at pedestrians or cyclists. And so there is a traffic brief that is pending, but we won't see the details that they are looking for, but we will get something to say that the intersection and the road infrastructure is suitable or not. Next point, noise and peaceful enjoyment. Recreational uses may generate vehicle noise, outdoor activity, parking lot noise, amplified sound, whistles, gatherings, evening disturbances, and late departures, and all incompatible with the quiet rural environment residents value and chose. So I'll point back to the map that the site is permitted to have industrial uses. So the noise and the ambient disturbance to the area has sort of already been assessed, whether it's a trucking yard or a contractor's yard or whatever you might think might be in it. There's a list of permitted uses that we would generate as a permitted use today. The outdoor activity, parking lot noise, amplified sounds. So the bylaw stipulates that a recreation facility must be indoors. So their concerns about whistles and things going on outdoors is hopefully contained by the fact that we'll see most of these activities happening inside. We won't have a soccer field out there. Lighting impacts, parking lot, building security, vehicle lighting from recreational uses could negatively affect nearby homes and alter the dark rural nighttime environment we currently enjoy. Through the site plan, all outdoor lighting will be required to be dark sky compliant. And again, it's permitted to be an industrial site, so it wouldn't be confined to the agricultural uses on the site. Natural heritage and environmental sensitivity. The notice acknowledges that natural heritage features, wetlands, and the need for environmental and archaeological assessments, confirming that these lands are environmentally sensitive. Increased development intensity, parking, grading, drainage changes, lighting, and human activity may harm wildlife and wetlands. We urge the township to require an independent review and full completion of all environmental studies before any decision is made on the application. So we have had an environmental impact study conducted on the eastern portion of the property. Those have been reviewed by our own third-party peer reviewer and by Autonomy Conservation, who are satisfied with the findings of the report. As we move on to detail, there may be a few amendments to it, looking at the site-specific development, but for the most part, the lines on the proposed zoning bylaw have been confirmed to be satisfactory. A lack of clarity on recreational facilities and secondary uses. The residents are being asked to comment on the zoning proposal without sufficient detail on the actual nature, scale, intensity, or scope on the proposing activity. We respectfully request clarification from the township on the following. There are a number of items on this list, but quickly going over a lot of them, we don't know the types of activities that are proposed, nor would we. We don't zone for, so for example, we don't zone a restaurant to say you need to be a burger place or a specific, like we couldn't speak to, you can only have a bowling alley. You can only have a XYZ. So we open it up to sporting facilities that have to remain indoors. So I think that's a lot of these items. Same with the expected attendance and hours of operation. We wouldn't know that at this time. And again, as an industrial use, you would expect to see the site being used as the developer sees fit. Amplified sounds, again, we're talking about indoors. Our food services, retail, and other accessory commercial activities planned. There is nothing specifically planned, but a accessory retail or food plate or food outlet is permitted as well. How does the township intend to ensure that the secondary use does not eventually become dominant or high impact? So the wording of the bylaw was written specifically to limit it to a secondary use, to limit the floor space to be 1% of the total lot area. We chose that to be significant or sufficient for the developer's use, so they can have small pockets of this secondary use on the site without it being carrying on and taking over the whether or not we see future proposals in the future, I can't speak to that. Precedent, once recreational facilities are permitted, future expansion and intensification or additional commercial style uses are likely to follow, further changing the area's character. So again, we have a 103-acre site, which is primarily designated for employment use, and we're adding a secondary recreational facility. So we have, as I mentioned, we have limited the language in the zoning bylaw to limit the amount of commercial space. So there's no reason to think that there's future intensification happening. The request is that we respectfully ask the township to deny ZBA-04-6. If the application proceeds, we request that approval be conditional on the completion of the following studies and safeguards. They list the studies they request, including hydrogeological, traffic, noise, lighting plan, environmental impact study, archaeological assessment, environmental peer review with wetland protection. So a number of these studies have been completed and the remainder are required as part of the site plan application. So we agree with that point. The safeguards they require, they would like strict limits on the hours of operation, clear occupancy limits, restriction on amplified sound and outdoor events, appropriate setbacks, buffering, and landscaping, a narrow, clearly defined list of permitted recreational uses. We will work through a number of those items as through the site plan as we get further details. And we will, of course, keep them apprised of any future reports. They asked to be informed about any future notices, reports, public meetings, and decisions related to the application. Other than that, township staff don't see a need to change our recommendation that the bylaw be approved and that everything meets the policies of the bylaw. Thank you.
Thanks for that summary, Matt. So just to reiterate before I go to council for members of for questions with regards to the application. I would assume that the letter would be equivalent to asking for the study in question that we were talking about with regards to the which one was it? I wrote it down with regards to the water study. So that I'm not sure about confidentiality, but if there is the opportunity, I would take this as a request. So can that and any other the associated studies that have been done, or maybe a comprehensive list of the ones that are pending regarding the application? I think it's important to understand that, you know, like there's a process that's followed, but you know, not all the studies are done up front, but they're in process and required for the approval to move forward, for the development to move forward. So even if they're not done at this point, there's still a catalyst that requires they be done in order to move forward to different phases. It's just that that's the stage we're at in the planning process. So is that a fair assessment then, that we can circulate whatever we have and whatever's permissible to the component or the proponent who brought forward the request? Is that something that has already been done or could be done in the not too distant future, I hope?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council and public. Yes, so through the planning process, it is a publicly open process. So had the applicant called or come in, we could have shared the whole file with them as we have it. We got this, the email was sent on Saturday, so I got it this morning. Otherwise, I would have talked to them already and walked them through all of what I just told you. But yes, I can send them all the reports that they ask for and come in and we can talk about them as they see fit. And to your point, yes, there's a number of studies that we do at zoning to establish the principal uses, and then we'll move on to detailed design after the zoning's approved or delayed.
Yep, okay, that's great. So we're gonna take that project forward and reach out to the proponent and then have those discussions or share the reports however they deem it appropriate. Okay, great. Council, members of the council, questions? Councilor Burke.
Through the chair to Bat, I'm always amazed at how things, I'm trying to figure out how things get done. So that other map you showed us there a minute ago showing the rural mapping, I'm trying to figure out in my head where it drops down Emsdale Road to the last building lot on the west side of the road that's occupied, and it jumps out into the field and stops. What's the rationale behind that? Like, I'm trying to figure out how this zoning got changed with those kind of odd shaped contours.
Karen, that would probably be you.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne and members of council and members of the public. So the lines on the official plan were completed back prior to 2015. The official plan went through a series of revisions, and admittedly, I will take the blame for this. The lines in this particular case are not accurately running with the property lines, but that is the nature of an official plan designation. Sometimes they bleed over property lines, sometimes they don't. But this type of situation will be flagged. So when we do our new official plan, we will make every effort to tidy things up to the best of our ability.
Is it fair to, Matt wants to weigh in on this, but I'll just ask a question and you might be answering it, but there's also a management issue with regards to the allocations that we need to fulfill, right? So I think that can also be a factor with regards to some of the mapping and not following property lines, but there is a ratio of different zones that we are legally obligated to maintain and sustain. So that can create complications. I know when we did the GMS through that last term of council, we found all sorts of little parcels hidden throughout, scattered throughout all of the lands, which was very confusing why you would have commercial pieces behind a farm in a landlocked area. And, so there has been historical precedents for, sort of really scattering certain things along to maintain that. And this could be an extension of that sort of same historical effort.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council and the public. Just to be clear, when the mapping is done, it is done with clear intent to permit proposed uses in appropriate locations for those uses. It is not done by some higgledy-piggledy kind of mindset. It is very deliberate, but sometimes the lines on the map, particularly when it's created in one technology and we convert it to another technology, sometimes we have issues like this. But it is a very deliberate process with very specific outcomes anticipated.
Well, thankfully, we have the digital age now where we're not drawing on pieces of paper with rulers and things like that. I know it's come a long way, so we can hopefully, I know there's a few of these sort of cleanup exercises that we're flagging for the next process. So Matt, sorry, you had a comment on that. No, you're okay. Other questions, members of council, Councilor Brink.
Through the chair back to whoever. It also mentions 1% of the 103 acres I think it's talking about, or is that 1% of phase one of this project? Because it looks like it's going to be in two separate phases. And does what your last explanation, does that clear up why the zoning and the natural features had to be realigned?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Byrne, members of the public, where to start? So the natural features were the zoning and were moved to align with the features that were found on site. So that was why we started this application. I'm sorry, I've misplaced your second question. Oh, the 1% was a number. So it was identified as a number to limit the amount of recreational use that could be on site. So whether 1% or 20,000 square feet, it was a number that was chosen to facilitate the amount of recreational facility that should be permitted. Whether in phase one or phase two, it doesn't matter. It'll be the whole site.
Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Chair, to to Matt. So for phase two on the western edge of this property, I assume we'll go through the same process for that, or is it just kind of get a buy now if phase one goes through? Just curious on what happens with future development. Thank you.
Through the chair to the council and public. So phase two, so through, if this bylaw as written gets approved, then the western half would be put into the M2 exception, which would permit the residential, or would permit the recreational uses, but it would have a holding on it. So it would come back to council to say that, yes, they have completed an environmental impact statement, they have provided the wetland compensation required, and that the archaeological assessment has been completed in that area. So we wouldn't go back and ask if the recreational facility was suitable. It would say whether or not the, whether those studies have been done and the area has been cleared. They just haven't done the work on that side of the property.
Yeah, and due to the amount, I mean, we've had meetings with the proponent over the course of this, the property acquisition and whatnot. And so there is a significant amount of natural, linkage and natural core areas that are compromising the site. And you can see that there's a big divide right between the two parcels. So I don't have a lot of confidence that there'll ever be development to the west, but I mean, ever is a long time, but certainly not for the foreseeable future based on the costs associated with just getting this to where it's been. It's been a Herculean effort to make the accommodations on the site, and having to traverse a landlocked parcel is no insignificant cost from an environmental study, but also, all the remediation and sensitivity efforts that would have to be done. So I don't think there's any, from my conversations with the proponent, I don't think there's any catalyst or expediency to move forward with any further development to the west. I think they'll have their hands full for the next 20 years with what's projected in phase one, just for public information. Other questions, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair back to Matt. So does this 1% recreational, does it incorporate both indoor and external outdoor recreation, or just the outdoor recreation for that 1%?
Just
Confirm that?
Through the chair to Councilor Byrne, members of the public. So the bylaw is written with a definition of recreational facility that limits it to being inside the building. So it's just parts of a building and a building. That's it.
Thanks, man. Seeing no other questions, we're going to open it up to members of the public wishing to speak to the application. So anyone, I think Mark may have given some people the information, but if you want to speak, just move to the lectern. And then I'll walk you through the next bit of the process if we have anyone who wants to speak to this application, but I know we've got a few on the agenda today. So anyone wishing to speak, just come forward. Going once. All right, sir. So I'm lit up now. So if you just give me a second, so just state your name and address for the clerk, and then I'll turn it over to you. So when I hit
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, residents. So my name is Christopher Comrie, and I'm the author of the submission that was read out, and I think it was satisfactorily addressed. And but we have another concern. Well, first of all, I'm like Mr. Byrne. I'm not great at reading maps, so I didn't even bother to try. But anyway, we realized that there are some wells being drilled. And we were wondering if these are wells that would supply water to the facility to be developed, or they are for hydrogeological studies. Are these for hydrogeological studies, or are they for the facility? Because if they are for the facility, then we're wondering, why are they being built before the application is being granted? So that was what was raised yesterday, and I thought that I'd just bring it to the public. Yeah.
Okay, Matt, you want to speak to that, or Karen, whomever?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of the public, Mr. Comrie. So the hydrogeological test was completed to find whether there was sufficient water on the site to supply the development as proposed right now. So what is on site right now are test wells and monitoring wells. And so they do that so that they can see, they do what's called the drawdown test. So they'll pump an amount of water over a set amount of time. And then they look in the monitoring wells to see whether or not the water levels go down in a series of areas so that they can say, yes, this site has sufficient water or not, or they need to drill somewhere else. And they ask for well records from the neighborhood so that they can get an assessment as to whether or not you have enough water or anyone in the neighborhood, so that whether or not those aquifers are connected and how. So it's in an effort to make sure that everyone has enough water. We don't want to approve something that doesn't have enough water. And to your letter, if you'd like to come in and talk about the rest of the application, we can certainly do that.
Thank you very much. That's it. Yeah. Anyone else we can speak to the application? Come with the lectern. Going once, going twice. Okay. Consideration of the report, council. Any questions with regards? So I'll read the motions that council receive and consider all comments related to the zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA, and that the bylaw number 2026-30 be approved to rezone the subject land. Straightforward. Any questions with regards to the motion? If not, we'll look for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Edgerton, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hunley. All in favor? That is approved. Next, we have another report of the public nature, building and planning 2026-13, 1910, County Road 10, McCamus zoning bylaw amendment. Ms. Ellis is speaking to this one.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. To members of council, members of the public and staff, the purpose of today's public meeting is to go over a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for an existing lot of record located in the hamlet of Ida. So this zoning bylaw amendment relates to a 5-lot residential plan of subdivision submitted to Peterborough County. The application number for that subdivision is 15T-25001. If you could flip a mark to the key map, that would be great, so we all understand where we are. This property is located at the intersection of Sharp Line, County Road 10, and Stewart Line. So it is an existing farm parcel. And as I've indicated, there is a proposal for a 5-lot subdivision on the south border of the property that fronts onto Sharp Line. If you could flip to the next map, that would be great, Mark. Yeah, so with this map, you can see the proposed lot layout of the subdivision. So there's 2 existing residential lots located at the intersection of County Road 10 and Sharp Line. The proposed 5 lots will be immediately west of those 2 existing lots and will infill an area between residential lots further to the west. The zoning bylaw amendment is required as a condition of approval of the plan of subdivision. So the whole property itself is about 40.9 hectares in size. And as I said, it has frontage on Sharp Line, County Road 10, and Stewart Line. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment, and Mark, I will ask if you could go to the schedule 1 for the zoning bylaw so everyone can see what we're talking about. Right there, yeah. So the first purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone a portion of the subject lands that are subject to the plan of subdivision application from the agricultural zone to the hamlet residential exception 21 zone. So in a standard hamlet residential zone, the minimum lot area requirement is 3,000 square meters or 0.74 acres. And the minimum lot frontage requirement is 20 meters or 66 feet. In the hamlet residential exception 21 zone, a minimum lot area of 2,830 square meters or 0.70 acres will be permitted. The exception zone will also require the installation of a tertiary treatment wastewater system on each of the new lots. The second purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone a portion of the subject property from the agricultural zone to the agricultural exception 25 zone. The standard minimum lot area requirement in the agricultural zone today is 40 hectares or 98.8 acres. In the agricultural exception 25 zone, a minimum lot area of 39 hectares or 96.36 acres will be permitted. With this application, notice was circulated by first-class prepaid mail to all assessed persons within 120 meters of the subject land. We've posted signs on the Stewart Line, Sharp Line, and County Road 10 frontages. Notice was provided on the township website. Notice was provided to all required ministries and agencies and all township management staff. At the time of writing of the report, we had received one verbal inquiry from a member of the public. They asked a number of questions about the application, but did not express any objections to the application at that time. Since the writing of the report, we have received one letter from a resident at 874 Stewart Line. They've indicated that they are in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, provided certain restrictions are in place. Their letter indicates that the country has high housing prices in part due to a lack of housing. A factor that contributes to the high cost of housing is the demand for materials used to build houses. Another factor that contributes to the lack of housing is the shortage of appropriately trained personnel to build the housing. To help remedy these factors, I suggest that the approval of the proposed bylaw amendment include the condition that the houses to be built on these lots be restricted in size. I suggest the restrictions should be that the basement not exceed 1,500 square feet and that the sum of the areas of all of the floors above the basement not exceed 1,500 square feet. Their second point is that this development results in significant land being taken out of use for agricultural purposes. Since many people in the world have insufficient food and most people are concerned about the cost of food, a reduction in the amount of land used for agriculture is a concern. To mitigate this, I suggest that the proposed bylaw amendment include the condition that the owner of the houses built on these lots be required to have a vegetable garden with an area of at least 1,000 square feet. So these are quite good suggestions. But unfortunately, the zoning bylaw tool is not the tool to implement them. In the Hamlet residential zone category today, we regulate the size of the house by lot coverage and the setbacks. That is a standard. Those regulations are standard across the Hamlet residential zone wherever it occurs in the township. Admittedly, we are doing an exception zone to recognize a little bit smaller lot area in this particular case. But I don't have any rationale before me today to justify a recommendation to you to limit the size of the house to 1,500 square feet. Maybe on 2 levels. Additionally, the zoning bylaw is not the place to require the implementation of a garden. Although it's a great idea, and I think there's general support for that, we don't have the tools necessarily to implement these suggestions. But we are appreciative of the comments that we received. Township department comments. Building and fire departments had no concerns with the application. Public Works has no concerns with the application. The Engineering and Construction Division of Planning, Development and Public Works at the County of Peterborough have no objections, comments, or concerns with the application. Canada Post also has no concerns with the application. We did not hear back from other agencies circulated as part of the standard circulation. This application has been analyzed in terms of the provincial planning statement, the Peterborough County official plan, the Township of Cavan-Monaghan official plan, and our current zoning bylaw. Based on our analysis of those documents and the policies enshrined therein, planning staff are comfortable today recommending to you that you receive and consider any public comments received regarding the application. And secondly, that bylaw number 2026-31 be approved to rezone the property from the agricultural zone to the Hamlet residential exception 21 zone and from the agricultural zone to the agricultural exception 25 zone.
Thank you for that report, Karen. Yep, interesting suggestions. I don't think we can, like you said, dictate who has a garden necessarily, but we always support that wishes. One question just for clarity with regards to the house size is, given the fact that there is consideration for a slightly smaller lot size, and you alluded to some of the planning implications about, what sort of controls or limits or policies influence the size of the builds in question. And obviously, if you're going to, especially given the nature of some of the other earlier comments, I mean, housing costs is a concern. And if we're going to smaller lots, you would hope that potentially creating smaller lots might help from a land size of the cost of the future build out. But is there any specific nuance that given the smaller lot size? I know there was tertiary treatment issues that needed to be addressed and have been accommodated and vetted through planning in order to make that accommodation. But from an actual structure size standpoint, are there implications of the smaller lot size to the actual build itself?
rather, not the 1,500 square feet, because that's very, again, very specific, but if there are, I'd like to hear that.
To you, Mayor Graham, members of council, members of the public. We have a standard lot size requirement in the Hamlet residential zone at this point in time. It's something that we've been implementing since 2018 when the new zoning bylaw was approved. Within that zone, there are a number of regulations, including minimum setbacks from the front and rear lot lines, from your side lot lines. We also have a lot coverage regulation. So those are the tools we use regularly to kind of prescribe the building envelope on the property. The other tool is the servicing requirements. And in this particular case, we do have hydrogeological information that indicates tertiary treatment is required. And I think, as we've discussed on a previous occasion, we went through a lot of hither, dither, and yon to come to some agreement of where we are today about that. And so we think those are the tools that are in place, and we are treating this application as we treat other applications, that the size of the house will be regulated by those existing setbacks, the lot coverage requirements, and the servicing limitations that are in place at that particular location in Cavan Monaghan.
The setbacks all remain the same, and if you're a smaller lot, the setbacks still are required to be adhered to, so that obviously reduces your building envelope. Not to say that you couldn't have additional stories. I guess we don't really regulate vertically, but there are service, oh yes, right, but to a point. But with regards to the size of the scope, we're not anticipating any towers of, so to speak, in this development with regards to the servicing limits as well. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Questions, members of council? Council Byrne.
Through the chair to Karen. Back roughly 7 years ago, after the township bought Mel Morton's farm down on the 8th line, Sire line, the boundaries got changed for the hamlet of Ida. And it jumped across the 11th line, now called Sharp Line, to the north about 86 meters, it looks like, from the documents I'm looking at. It stopped at the first property line going west. I'm just trying to figure out the intent, because the way it's laid out, according to that map up there right now that I'm looking at, the two lots that got brought in the last couple of years look like they're slightly deeper to the north. I'm just wondering why the boundary of Hamlet of Ida didn't follow straight west down past and mirror what's already on the south side of the 11th, a Sharp Line for the last number of decades. Either up past Decorah Crescent or right through to the next building lot where John Carpenter is. But the intent of why that boundary change was done and the way it's moved, I don't know if I raised one concern that boundary could be farther north, because you mentioned here a minute ago about the standard is 0.74 acre for a residential lot in a hamlet designation, but these are going to work out to be 0.7 of an acre. Is that the new standard, or is that an option?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of the public. So two things. So in the Hamlet residential zone, the standard of 0.74 acres continues. That standard will apply across the Hamlet residential zone in Cavan Monaghan. With this particular application, they have applied for a zoning bylaw amendment. We are proposing an exception to permit a little bit smaller lot area based on the scientific information that we have as part of the plan of subdivision application. So for all intents and purposes, the change to the less lot area is applicable to these properties only, like these 5 lots. So it's an exception for those 5 lots only. In terms of where the hamlet designation is, when we did the official plan, with an official plan exercise under the provincial planning statement, the municipality has an obligation to designate lands, a certain amount of lands, to provide for growth opportunities over a time period. So with that exercise, most of the growth has been allocated to Millbrook and environs, as you know, on piped water and sewer services. But we also allocated some growth potential to our existing hamlet areas. Ida at that time was seen as a place that could accommodate some minor additional rounding out. That's why we've jumped across to the north side of Sharp Line to round out. the line went kind of in keeping where there's a natural swale across the back. So the line was put there to accommodate what at that time was considered standard residential lot depths. With an official plan designation, unless you follow a road, a water course, a railway, that designation boundary is a little bit fluid. So we knew we could move it a little bit here. I'm not talking moving at 500 meters, but I'm talking, 10, 20 meters is reasonable. In terms of how these lots fit in between the existing development pattern, the lots immediately to the west that you talked about that are a little bit deeper, those lots resulted from a privately initiated site-specific official plan amendment that was done by the owner of the property at the time. They changed the official plan designation and that got approved. And then the zoning was done as a condition of that. And then they applied for 2 severance applications to actually create the lots. So that was done totally at the request of the landowner, and it was evaluated based on the policy framework at that point in time, and those lots got approved.
So just in summary of that, I mean, some of the lines at the back of the properties are predicated based on what's being requested by the proponents that are doing the development, right? If they're not requesting the additional further back, then that's not what we're moving forward with, right? Like there's autonomy and rights based on what you want to apply for. And that can have influence, especially when you're talking about rounding out, because I remember in the previous term of council, we had there was, I think it's been somewhat resolved now, a bit of ambiguity. Like there were certain housing applications that we received where there was a fraction of a line drawn where, yes, I'm in the settlement area by inches or feet, maybe probably in reality. And it turned out through the Ontario Land Tribunal that counts, and that is considered rounding out regardless of how little or how great it is. So you are entitled to rights as they're governed in the policies that we've created and that the province bestows on us. And those really dictate sort of how it works. And by applications, they can sort of dictate and make some of the lines a little wigglier than they would otherwise might like them to be. Councillor Byrne, question?
Through the chair. So that concept of rounding out the hamlet designation back in the official plan, way before this new scientific research on the tertiary septic systems was in play here in this township. What was the reasoning for not rounding out farther to the west? And just like if you were going to round out a hamlet, you've already got that established on the south side of that same concession line. The term round out would tend to make think, okay, we'll mirror that or do something similar.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council and the public. So when I talk about rounding out, and we'll get into this with the new official plan, it is somewhat of a numbers game in terms of looking at how many hectares we actually need to accommodate residential growth. And we have to evaluate that exercise in terms of the other objectives and other policies of the provincial planning statement and of our own official plan. So I think most of you will recognize that agriculture is a big, important part of Cavan Monaghan, and we have very strict policies in terms of trying to protect our agricultural land base. So when we are considering rounding out and accommodating non-agricultural development, we are always looking at that with an eye to how will this affect the farming community. And that is why when we looked at rounding out Ida, the limitations on the hamlet designation were pretty tight. It was done at that point in time based on the policy framework at that point in time. I'm going to be honest with you, things are a little more loose today. So when we come back to do the new official plan, depending on the numbers in our growth management strategy, while agriculture is still important, the building of homes is equally important. So we may be looking at it through a slightly different framework moving forward. But that's really the reason why, is because we did look at other hamlets like the 5 Mile Turn, Springville, Baileyboro, South Monaghan. We looked at them all, and this is what we felt comfortable with at the time that met our numbers in terms of where we needed to be to satisfy provincial policy.
Yeah, and there's been a number of foundational changes in provincial policy that would have pertained to that process as well. Like at the time, that we weren't able, the municipality wasn't able to identify or create new settlement areas whatsoever. So regardless of where you wanted to potentially see or where you think it might have the best, potential to allocate growth, like that was not a municipal control, where now there's a process by which you could establish a new settlement area if you so chose. So back then, that wasn't the case. So you kind of had to, from a rounding out standpoint, and there's also provincial legislation in the policy that talks about how the majority of the growth has to be allocated to service lands as well. So that's another reason why you don't allocate more to the rounded out areas, because the policy says that's not where they want growth to be allocated. So it's like you said, there's a bit of a management of all these policies, but there's also been so many changes since 2018. And we're very much excited to finally get started on this new work to make a lot of these updates and corrections and things like that from a staffing standpoint. But we're held up by the province and the county's official plan that hasn't been approved in 3 years. So on we go, and we'll continue to hurry up and wait. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, on a separate subject, some of the people in the area are concerned the runoff from that field to the north, most of it escapes to the very southeast corner of the property to cross over the County Road 10 and meander on down behind some of those other housings into the ravine. These new houses, if they impact the established lots that you've already let be built, what happens for those people? What's their concern?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, could you maybe rephrase that a little bit? I'm not entirely clear what you're asking.
Thanks, Ms. Ellis.
So yes, now the map's gone, but there's already 3 houses on that corner, the southeast corner of that farm. A lot of the runoff and the tile drainage from that farm runs to that southeast corner. People in the area right now are concerned that these new building lots, depending on what they do at the back of their properties, might affect that, might increase that runoff flow, which is only a big concern in the spring, but that's concern just the same.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council and the public. So as part of the building permit process, lot grading information will be required and will be reviewed by township staff to ensure that the lots are properly graded so that there is no adverse impact on adjacent property owners.
Thanks, Ms. Ellis. Other questions? If not, seeing no more questions from members of council, we'll open up for members of the public wishing to speak to this application. Anyone want to move forward to the lectern? Going once? Okay, absolutely, Mr. Taylor. Welcome.
There we go. Thank you. Just a number of comments arising from some of the questions made today. This map denotes that the rear property line will match up with the 2 lots immediately to the west. There was a comment that they might have been staggered. The line was identified to match the rear property line of the 2 lots that were approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal in a written decision. We actually had the written decision at the time of the application, and so we drew the line to correspond and match up with the rear property lines of the 2 lots that were approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal. We could have extended the rear property line another 3 meters to the north. It would have, of course, resulted in a rather staggered rear lot line. If you look at the configuration of the other lots in the area, the extra 3 meters was actually considered because it would have given the minimum 3,000 square meter requirement in terms of the hamlet residential. However, in the discussions that took place, it was sort of a quid pro quo. We'd reduce the lot line, regularize the rear lots, and then consider whether the 2,800 approximately square meters of lot area was appropriate from the standpoint of urban design. And in the urban design, your building envelope and height size, of course, predominantly governs the size of the structure. There are the setbacks that have been referenced in terms of a desire to see the buildings minimized to 1,500 square feet. I can tell you after driving through Markham on Sunday that the building envelopes that you observe there, which might have a 2-foot side yard on both sides and a 5-foot front yard, will not lead to a cheaper house. It just doesn't happen. They get pushed into a smaller building envelope. I can indicate from the standpoint of dealing with the comment that was provided by the ratepayer. It's a good comment. Affordability is of concern. It always is of concern. I predict that you will likely receive mandatory provisions from the province. I think they're coming soon to prescribe smaller lot sizes, particularly within the context of hamlet designations, smaller than even these particular lots. We are quite convinced from both the soils tests that have been taken, and soils tests are important, but also from the studies that have been evaluated in terms of the tertiary treatment systems, that they will operate in an environmentally sustainable and environmentally responsible manner. There are different types of tertiary treatment systems, but the evidence is in. I find that the bureaucracy does not like to accept the evidence. The empirical evidence is in. Tertiary treatment systems are 10,000 times better than your Class C environmental systems in terms of nitrates and phosphates. That accords not just with the evidence being derived in Ontario for systems like the Waterloo biofilter system and the Quebec system that's now being introduced into Ontario, but also through the Waterloo biofilter systems and extensive studies that were done in the Chesapeake Bay area. We're talking 1,500 tests being evaluated and monitored. So from the standpoint of tertiary treatment, it does have difficulties associated with ongoing costs and maintenance, but it also has environmental benefits that are associated with it. Let me be clear. The evidence is in. The environmental impacts represented by tertiary treatments on these 5 lots are better than having these 5 lots go to a treatment facility, whether it be a local treatment facility or whether it be the City of Peterborough treatment facility. From the standpoint of the treatments of phosphates and nitrates, when you look at the amount of phosphates that exists in the Otonabee River, the evidence is beyond reproach that from the standpoint of environmental protection, believe it or not, having these lots on a tertiary treatment system is better environmentally than having it treated by a treatment plant, a physical treatment plant. When you look at the consequences of that, that means that rural treatment facilities like this in the rural area are better than actually servicing these lots if they were within the City of Peterborough from an environmental standpoint, from the amount of nitrates and phosphates that get discharged into a water course. So from the standpoint of environmental integrity, we're advancing these lots. It's been reviewed at the county level. In early April, you considered a report associated with the plan of subdivision, and you did not receive at that point. And sometimes it's very, very difficult for you to receive all of the plans, but the stormwater management plan has been done for each of these 5 lots. This goes to the whole issue of the runoff associated with the agricultural operations to the north. To the east are the 2 lots. You'll see the parts in the broken line at the top. That is an easement. That's a stormwater easement discharging into the corner where all of the water goes at County Road number 10 and Sharp Line. So there's mitigation measures in the actual design of the stormwater to have rock gardens. You got a comment in terms of market gardens. We've got rock gardens actually to facilitate the mitigation within the context of the runoff. The rock garden approach actually originated in various components of Europe, particularly Germany, where in fact it was found to mitigate stormwater runoff. It not only diminishes the runoff, it captures other types of chemicals, contaminants, other types of residue that might be involved in terms of the stormwater runoff. So these 5 lots probably have the best type of on-site stormwater management to mitigate that particular type of concern that's been raised. So from the standpoint of addressing matters, I did welcome the comment that individuals might want to have food production gardens, but that's voluntary. It's just not mandatory. However, I'm not going to lose the opportunity to advance that particular approach is certainly compatible with community market gardens. Urge your municipality, if it's never been on the list of concerns, to actually consider community market gardens. Back in the 1980s, I advanced that for the city of Peterborough, and there was some modest success for the same. That was gardens on public property, and then ratepayer groups would engage within the context of engaging in that particular type of activity. Your staff is well aware that I'm a big proponent of an aquaponics facility for every community in Canada. And I applaud the First Nations at Curve Lake. They have opened their 25,000 square foot aquaponics facility available to be used year round, no herbicides, no pesticides. And from the standpoint of year-round operation, it helps to alleviate costs from international shipments. You have a local supply, and there are objectives in terms of those types of community market facilities to try to grow peaches and pineapples in Canada, believe it or not. So that's something that you may want to keep in mind. But from the standpoint of this proposal, we'd like to keep it voluntary as to whether or not people are going to engage in their own food production on site. Subject to any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Question for Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair, just because your expertise, the question I have, the new owner puts in a tertiary system, and I don't have a problem with that whole concept. What happens if he decides that hey, it's costing me electricity and I turn off the switch day one? What's the outcome of that down the road? You got switch mics.
Well, there are obligations within the context of environmental protection to ensure that you have a proper sewage system, number one. Number two, they sign a contract with the supplier, if it's the Waterloo Biofilter company, that requires maintenance obligations on a yearly basis. There are alarm systems that form components of the operation, alarm systems that are capable of being evaluated as a component of the subdivision agreement that's going to be entered into with the county. So there are mechanisms to enforce this. There are mechanisms between the private homeowner and the supplier as well.
Follow up, Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair. So I didn't have any issue with the idea of the tertiary system, and we've talked, we know there's things changing there for the improvement. My big concern with the lot size is that it's a standard for everybody. One set of rules for everybody. It's something that I've been for a long, long time. But I know you've been out by the property, so you already seen the rock garden that the neighbors at the corner had to build to keep from having their basement flooded, and it's working. But yeah, that was just a concern of theirs, is where is that runoff going to go? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other members of the public wishing to speak to the application? If not, seeing going once, going twice. Oh, sorry. All right, with that, we'll move to council consideration of the report. There are 2 recommendations that council receive and consider any public comments regarding the application, and that bylaw number 2026-31 be approved to rezone the property from the agricultural zone to the Hamlet residential exception 21, HR 21 zone, and from the agricultural A zone to the agricultural exception 25 zone. And mover and a seconder for those recommendations, moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councilor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, members of the council and members of the public for the comments. Next item is report building planning 2026-14 Cathcart Crescent zoning bylaw amendment. Miss Ellis.
Mayor Graham, members of council and the public. Planning report 2026-14 is before you today. regarding a public meeting for rezoning related to a number of severance applications located on properties in part of Lot 23 Concession 11 Cavan and part of Lot 1 Concession 10 North Monaghan. If you could go to the key map, Mark, that would be great. Thank you. So we do have existing lots of record that have been the subject of a number of consent applications with Peterborough County. Those consent or severance applications include B 150-22A, B 151-22A, B 152-22A, and B 12-25A. With the consent or severance applications, the lot area and frontage of an existing lot were increased and 2 new residential lots were created. The rezoning of a portion of the subject lands is required as a condition of approval of application B 12-25-A. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment before you today is to rezone a portion of the Hamlet residential zone to the future development zone. Secondly, to rezone a portion of the future development zone to the Hamlet residential zone. And finally, to maintain the existing Hamlet residential zone and future development zones on a portion of the lands. If you could flip to the next map. So with this map, you can see the severance application. So the area at the south in green is a lot addition to the lot immediately south. The area that's kind of a purpley blue color is the new lot. The red is another new lot. And then the area to the north where it says retained lands is what is left over. So you can see we've got essentially 3 residential lots and then an area of retained land that we don't know what is going to happen with at this moment in time. And then if you could flip to the next map, Mark, please. And this schematic map just shows you exactly where the zone boundaries are related to the lot lines. So the area in yellow will be the Hamlet residential zone. The area in pink will be the future development zone, and that is the solid line area. And then the dotted area is existing future development. It will stay. And then the area in blue will be future development zone to the Hamlet residential zone. So this is a bit complicated and I'm sorry, but ultimately what you're going to get or what Cavan Monaghan is going to get are 2 new residential lots, an existing, so there's going to be 3 residential lots. So one exists already, but it's undersized. It will be bigger. The other 2 will meet the size, and then we'll have an area for future development, which plans will come forward at the time the proponent feels is appropriate. So what will happen in the Hamlet residential zone, a single detached dwelling and accessory buildings will be permitted on each of the lots. The future development zone permits a community garden, a conservation use and public uses. Existing agricultural, residential, and low-intensity recreational uses are also permitted. To the best of my knowledge, there's no proposed use for the future development zone lands at this time. Like the last application, notice of this application was circulated to all assessed persons within 120 meters of the subject property, to all required ministries and agencies, to all township staff. And sign was posted on the Cathcart frontage of the properties. So the notice does comply with the requirements of the Planning Act. We have not received any public comment related to this application. Township department managers have not indicated any concern about the proposed rezoning. Nexicom and Peterborough County and Enbridge also indicated they have no comments or objection to the application. The application was evaluated in terms of the provincial planning statement, the Peterborough County official plan, Cavan Monaghan Township official plan, and the current comprehensive zoning bylaw. The application is consistent with the PPS and does conform to the official plans. Thus, township staff are recommending today that council receive and consider any public comments received regarding the application. And secondly, that bylaw number 2026-32 be approved to rezone the subject lands from the Hamlet residential zone to the future development zone and from the future development zone to the Hamlet residential zone.
So many zones. Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Just a question, I guess, for clarity. You did it. It's very complicated, so I appreciate the effort. So just with regards to the interpretation of this map, this future development zone at the rear of the other property will that be in isolation to the future development zone in the retained lands above? Like, we're not merging the retained lands in that future development zone in blue, are we? Or like, that was the one element of this much more clearer map. I know there's a lot of zigzags going on, but can you maybe speak to that sort of, not the lots in question, because I think that's fairly understood, that we're getting 2 additional lots and expanding 1 existing lot. But can you maybe speak to some of the issues at the rear of those properties and the complications therein?
To you, Mayor Graham and members of council. So the blue area is actually part of the residential lot. So that blue area will go from future development zone to Hamlet residential, and it's part of the lot. Yeah, all of that will be 1 lot. So it will be zoned for a single detached dwelling and accessory buildings. The retained lands and the future development zone, which is the pink area, is all merged as 1. So it will, at a time when the applicant deems appropriate and they have a plan, they'll come forward, but all of that property is now, for the purposes, is 1 parcel.
So as was similar as a discussion in the previous report, what's the catalyst for the arrow portion of the 2 properties rather than sort of truing up, to the back lots, understanding that there's somewhat of an angle there, but what was the obstruction to just simply building the lots to the rear rather than having that, the 2 pieces extend behind?
To you, Mayor Graham and members of council, members of the public. So this particular area of the township does have some history to it, in that we had a registered compiled plan that was in the eyebrow of the area between Cathcart Crescent and the highway. So there was a number of residential lots there. And when we got up to the north part of the eyebrow, the lots got narrower and narrow. There also used to be an unopened road allowance between the lots and the highway that was owned by the township. And a number of years ago, the township closed up and sold a portion of that road allowance to the current applicant. A portion of that road allowance is owned by, I think we still own it, but MTO has an interest in it, or I can't remember if they own it. But anyway, we did follow up with them. They've expressed an interest. Yes, they're still, I believe they own it, sorry, and they're keeping it at this moment in time. So that's why you get the irregular zone boundaries. So the area in blue used to be like part of the road allowance.
Okay, we'll take it, I guess. It is confusing, but I understand that is the nature of some of these old maps. Councilor Byrne, question.
Through the chair to Karen, please. Yeah, that was my big concern, was this little wedge, but you say that's going to be incorporated. So the entire part that is blue on this diagram belongs to the northern single lot that's going to be created under this idea, if I'm correct. To the bottom of that, it looks like we create another little sliver of unknown land directly below it. That area right there am I reading this right? Like,
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne and members of the public. So the green area to the south is a lot addition. So those lands are going to be added to the property to the south where Mark is moving the little hand. So that lot where the hand is now on the screen is one of the lots in the compiled plan. It is undersized as it is. So by adding a little more property to it, we get closer to the minimum lot area requirement of the Hamlet residential zone to permit it to be developed with a single detached dwelling.
Yeah, but I think what we're referring to is the trapezoid behind it, right? Like, there's a gap. The green, I think we all understand the green is adding to the lowest. But there's yet another trapezoid behind, kind of along the green, and then kind of along the whole back of the second. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So 1 makes sense, but there's a sliver that goes past the boundary of 1, and then is it affixed to number 2 or not? Sorry, I got it.
To you, Mayor Graham, members of council. So the sliver that is not colored, but that is just to the right of the green area, that's the area that MTO owns. That is part of the Used to be part of the road allowance, now they own it. It may be used as part of the highway improvement project, we are not sure.
Well, it's not as though it's owned by this proponent. It could be simply connected to dots. There's a separate owner who owns it for the sake of, okay, fair enough. Now I understand. Council Burn.
Through the chair back to Karen. So this area of road has been talked about being widened for, I don't know, 40 something years. We're still waiting for the Ontario government to get organized with MTO. I know they bought the bottom of the hill, a lot of property to expand the intersection at our 10th line, but how did they manage to sell off a piece of road allowance and end up with that blue sliver the way it is? Like, that makes zero sense to me, but I get things get done.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council and the public. So the road allowance that actually went through here was owned by the township, so the township sold it. So it was not the Ministry of Transportation. The ministry at the time expressed interest in keeping a portion of it. So they have a portion of it. The applicant today did purchase the remainder of the road allowance from the township, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember how many years ago that was. But with the intent of making the lots in the compiled plan a suitable lot area so that they could be developed. And I'm sure Mr. Taylor can speak more fully to that.
We will get to that, no doubt. Question again, Councilor Burn.
Through the chair back to Karen. Earlier on in the discussion, you mentioned something about, and I think it's directly south of the bottom lot that's getting the green added to it. I thought I heard you say something about an unknown future. You don't know what's going to happen there. What are the options for that piece of property that you were referring to?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council and the public. So the area I was referring to is actually the portion in pink. So it's the area to the north. It is zoned future development. It is located with the hamlet, within the hamlet designation. The hamlet designation does permit a variety of uses, including residential, small scale, commercial, industrial, some small scale institutional as well. So I am not sure what the applicant has in mind for that area at this moment in time. There is some environmental constraint on the property, but we have no proposal at hand to know what might happen in that area, but it is designated hamlet.
Through the chair, on that note, is there any inclination at all? Mr. Black's got quite a bit of subdivisions done down there in that area, and there's been a lot in there. Is there any community park option for any of this, or is everything just cash in lieu of for the severances?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council and the public. So there is no community parkland in that area at this moment in time. Mr. Black has participated in the development of a compiled plan that was done back a gajillion years ago that was not developable until he did lots of work, and together with the township, we did lots of study and our hydrogeological information and came up with a solution. So that has allowed those lots to be developed with the tertiary treatment system protocols. So that subdivision already exists. So the horse was out of the barn, so to speak, in terms of parkland. With severance applications, historically, the township has not asked for land because you get such a small piece of land, it is useless for us. So with a severance application, historically, we have asked for cash in lieu of parkland, that then we take that money and invest in the land that we generally acquire through a plan of subdivision process.
Thanks, Ms. Ellis. Okay, well, I think we got the map under our thumb now, which was no small feat. So thanks for that. I see no other questions from members of council this time. So we'll open up for members of the public wishing to come forward and speak to the application. Anyone wishing to come forward, by all means.
Afternoon to members of council. I act on behalf of the applicants, Paul and Helen Black. Just to give you some context arising from the comments today. Yes, this is a convoluted mess from the standpoint of land tenure and lot configurations as they presently exist. That's what you get when you have checkerboarding. In essence, what we are doing And it's been the subject of certainly public review, not only involving the county for the severances, but also your township for the rezoning, is actually taking checkerboarded parcels and regularizing them. And regularizing them through a comprehensive public review process with the studies that were required in terms of the severance application. So you're taking lots that had very poor land configurations. For example, the parcel immediately to the lot addition, the green is the lot addition onto the lot that's immediately to the south, shown in yellow. We drew the line where the lot addition is reflected and the other lines for the other two lots, because we wanted as close as we could get to a 90-degree angle to Cathcart Crescent. The other lots, if you look at the checkerboarded lots to the south that have existed, none of them are at 90-degree angles to Cathcart Crescent. And so from the standpoint of appearance, maintenance, actually incorporating the site features into an appropriate design, all of those are effectively checkerboarded lots. These lots that are being created, you're going to end up with 3 in the Hamlet residential zone for Hamlet residential, with at least an attempt at regularizing the lot configurations, the best that we could do, given what we've got in terms of the lots. In terms of the 2 lots to the north, the one including the blue, we prescribed minimum lot area 3,000 square meters to meet your Hamlet residential lot area issue, to avoid all of the discussions that we had with the McCamus proposal. So those are all at 3,000 square meters. The small triangle that's not colored, it has an interesting history because it formed part of the old road allowance, actually. And as a component of this particular review, we've had discussions with the county because of the land severance process. We've had discussions with the MTO. Our preference was to actually purchase that triangle. They wouldn't sell it to us. We did try over a period of about 1.5 years, I should tell you, in terms of trying to acquire that particular triangle. That would have made everything square up from the standpoint of dealing with matters. But they indicated, we're not going to oppose what you're advocating, because what we still want the capability of that triangle. If we took part of the blue area, if the county road was to be widened, then it's going to leave your lot legal non-conforming. That's their position. That wasn't my position. That was actually their position. And so we said, fine. So from the standpoint of the lot configurations, that's how it's ended up on the eastern side of the proposed lots. The small triangle to the north is part of a larger parcel that was also created way, way back. I don't know whether you have a plan that goes right to the next township road. Do you? Can you go to the north? No, you don't have one? Okay. There it is. Okay. So there's this, that's the property. I call it the Scheck property. That was the predecessor in title. It's a long triangular parcel. That pink area will be added to it. At this point in time, we're evaluating options. I'll be quite candid. To the north, it's not shown on this plan, there is a beautiful pond. Probably everybody knows about the beautiful pond. I call that the hockey family lot, because the people in the neighborhood actually played hockey on it. So it would be ideal for a hockey crazy family to actually build a nice home and have a pond that they can actually play hockey on, a good sized pond throughout the winter. So that's a potential site for another lot, but that's at the northern perimeter. And we're assessing that because it's difficult to create a lot with a pond on it. You can imagine the environmental assessments that have to be undertaken from that perspective, and the hydrogeology that would be represented. So that's a site that is under evaluation. It only took us 3 years to acquire it, and it was acquired through the Public Trustee's Office. It had an interesting history in its own context. So that's the nature of the proposal. We're regularizing lots. We're creating three that have a better configuration than presently exist. And we meet the minimum standard requirements for the two lots to the north associated with your hamlet residential zone.
Thank you. Question, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair back to you, because you seem like you had a lot of dialogue with MTO and the government. So yeah, that was the old highway rather than trying to crest the hill that we now crest. Is their intention not to let that road allowance that they have go because of possible expansion to the west on that road going up the hill?
Well, we've been at this for a long time, going back to effectively about 2008, 2009, when we looked at the development of the lots to the south on the registered compiled plan. So we had dealings with MTO back then. I can say to you, they have no fixed plan. They really don't. They just want to maintain flexibility within the context of future development in the area. But at this point in time, it depends on the personnel that you talk to. Sometimes they seem to have definitive plans within the context of a potential expansion going up the hill. On other occasions, they don't. They just want to maintain as much as they can from the standpoint of future options.
All right, thank you for that. And I agree. It seems like we're making the best of a very complicated situation. So I commend you guys on that. And I know it probably hasn't been the simplest of all applications. So kudos to everyone for getting it to this point. Seeing no other questions, we'll move to consideration of the report. There are two recommendations that council receive and consider any public comments received regarding the application, and that bylaw number 2026-32 be approved to rezone the subject lands from Hamlet Residential HR zone to future development zone, and from future development zone to Hamlet Residential HR zone. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. That concludes our public meeting. So I need a resolution to close the public meeting. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the regular meeting held May 4th. Can I get a mover and a seconder for those minutes approved as presented? Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. We have our minutes from committee and boards from the Millwood Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting of March 23rd. We're looking to approve those minutes as presented. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? Those are also approved as presented. To the reports, Ms. Pope, Asset Replacement Reserve 2026 Plan Amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to council, I have before you report 2026-04 for the Asset Replacement Reserve. If you recall, during the 2026 final approval, the council did approve the transfer and use of sales of property from both Hydro with 920 Larmer Line and 1 Union Street Canada Post to offset the Asset Replacement Reserve transfer. This would have been 98% of our depreciation level. However, because the 1 Union Street property sale is no longer proceeding, we are at a loss of 195,000, and therefore we are proposing to mitigate that by reducing our investment to the Asset Replacement Reserve at this time to 92% from the 98, thereby removing that 195,000 that we are not receiving this year. And this recommendation is provided for council's consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Pope. It's too bad. I mean, there was a contract signed with, so usually that dictates that we're fairly far along with the purchase, but it seems as though it's kind of dissolved on itself in this point. So we were using this funds to uplift our asset replacement reserve to the 98th percentile. So it only makes sense and fair to reduce the asset replacement reserve contribution by so many funds. Questions, members of council, with regards to the report? If not, we'll take a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, Ms. Pope. Next item is again Ms. Pope with actual to budget January to March 2026.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to all of council. I actually have a combined report from myself and the Deputy Treasurer to receive the actual to budget report for the first quarter of 2026, which is the period from January 1st to March 31st. The summary has been provided on page 2. You'll notice that it in the CAO budget, it appears to be a negative, but that's because the sale of properties goes through her report. So she's received more revenue than what she spent, obviously. Those will be transferred as per the motions of council. But just to bring that to light, that was the only oddity in this particular quarter. And if you're looking there, we also provide, as requested previously by our deputy mayor, to have a comparison to each quarter from the year before, just to see where we're sitting. So that's provided on the right-hand side there for your comparison.
Ms. Pope, questions, members of council with regards to the report? If not, it's just an update for information and appreciate you providing clarity on those few points that are a bit of outliers. So mover and a seconder to receive the report for information, moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley, all in favor. That is approved. Next is Finance Tax Levy, Special Services Levy, and BIA bylaws. Ms. Pope.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to all of council, I have before you the tax levy and special services levy and BIA bylaws. This is our annual report to bring forward the schedules now they're balanced to receive the education and the county rates as we prepare for processing our tax bills, which are mailed out the first week of July annually each year.
Again, just a little housekeeping report to get updates now that all of that's finalized. Any questions, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair to Ms. Pope, do we know where we're at with the school board levy, the county levy? What are we looking at for a total to the taxpayer?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to council. In anticipation of your question, I've pulled forward the details. Our municipal tax rate at the 2026 budget was a 2.65% increase estimated. And therefore, overall, we're looking at about a $20 increase on $100,000 of assessment for our municipality, approximately $24 from the county, and education remained the same. So the overall increase combined looks to be about 3.2% at this time overall on the full tax rate. If I put that down into $100,000 of assessment, you're looking at about $45 increase on $100,000 of assessment over the full year next year.
Thanks for that summary, Ms. Pope. Looking for a recommendation or mover and a seconder to remove the report and the recommendation. Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, Ms. Pope. Moving on. Next, we have Building and Planning Administrative Monetary Penalty System Bylaw and Screening Hearing Bylaw Office Report with Mr. Phillips. There you are, right behind the lectern, right where I like you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to council. The report before you is with regard to administrative monetary penalty system. This was brought to council back in February for council's consideration with a draft just for information, and all council's comments were received. Staff has taken that back, made several changes, re-reviewed with senior staff and re-reviewed with legal. The main change we've done is we've reduced the amount of designated bylaws. So that is the bylaws that would be enforced through this process. We've restricted to simply parking and traffic, which is one bylaw, and refuse and debris. These two bylaws have been chosen because these are the two that have the biggest benefit to the taxpayer to have under this new system. So there were several comments heard. Councilor Byrne, your comment about moving a judicial process to a municipal employee and staff is definitely a valid point. But the amount of taxpayer money that this could efficiently reduce is enough to bring it forward. So currently, if we take an example of the refuse bylaw, if we have somebody dump refuse out on any rural road, right now we try to take that to the POA, like Provincial Offenses Office. That can take several trips. We have to write up our tickets. We have to go down there and get the JP's approval on the ticket itself. The last time I went there was 3. You get a different JP on the day that just reviews your ticket alone. So we've already got all that staff time, gas, everything tied up into just laying a charge. Once we lay that charge, we then have to wait for a court date. And right now those court dates are all over the place. Then we have to attend, and the proponent would attend if they're disputing it. And this is all for just the very small values that we have for fines right now. So potentially we're trying to get, say, a $250 fine that could be reduced to $75 after 6 months of trying to attend court and all this. So you can see where the efficiencies lie in the AMPS program, which is all in-house here in Cavan-Monaghan. To the taxpayer, to the residents who are going to receive any of these fines. Nothing in our enforcement process is going to change. We're not going to go, as soon as we get this approved, hopefully, we're not going to be going out there laying charges left, right, and center. It's going to be the same process we always do, which is education and working with the people first. The big savings here is in our parking and traffic with, when it comes to parking specifically, our only option is to tow. So we try to lay 2 warning tags for every vehicle that we get. If we have somebody parking overnight or parking in a spot that they're not allowed to be parking, we try to lay 1 warning tag and then a second one just to make sure the wind didn't blow it off or weather did something to it and they didn't get it. Then we're towing. Those towing, as I've said in the last time, charges can be up to $500. The other issue with those tows is people don't know where the car's gone. So they may not have complied even after the 2 warnings, but it's still using a sledgehammer or a mallet will do, where now they don't know where their car's gone. Once they find out, they're contacting us, they're contacting the police. There's several hours of staff time tied up in that, just getting back to the person. And then it's a $500 charge. That's quite significant for somebody who is just parking in a spot that may have been overnight for a 3rd time. Through the AMPS program, we'll be laying a small charge that's defined by council. Council has the ability to change these fines if after a year time we find that they're too significant or they're not enough. It's all within council's power to change that. It's also in council's power to add bylaws and to remove bylaws in this. So the power still does lie with council. At any time, these can be modified. So right now, we are just asking that the 2 bylaws be put into the AMPS program to be passed here. After that, we will follow our procurement bylaw to get a hearing officer under retainer so that through this process, we will have an in-house screening review officer and a subsequent hearing review officer. So that would be the next steps after this. So the report before you is that council approved administrative monetary penalty system bylaw 2026-28 and screening and hearing officer bylaw 2026-29. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Phillips. I understand, like, it is a, I thanks for that clarity, because I think it can be read a certain way, but we're not changing the process. We always still, when it comes to bylaw enforcement, we're always attempting, all these efforts go up front about identifying the issue, communicating the issue, educating about the implications therein before you get to this. This is really just cleaning up we haven't been able to work together. We haven't come up with an enforcement. There's ongoing issues that they're seemingly not willing to understand and work with us on at the resolution. So all the AMP profile does is, or a program does, is make that last resort much more efficient. Like, there's no intention to be throwing we don't have staffing to lay charges everywhere, but where we have ongoing issues, again, we go through all of the inefficiencies in the process to try to work with proponents and residents about all the bylaws. And I get calls every week about bylaw enforcement and wanting it to be simpler. And we don't have that authority. But certainly the court matter component to enforcing of the bylaws for such small nominal amounts. People want these bylaws and are calling to get them enforced more effectively, more efficiently. And a lot of the time, the complaints pile up on the same issue because it's at the courts. And it takes months and months and months, and it's not fair for the individual who's being compromised or being infringed on by the person not following the rules. It's not fair to them to continue to receive that disruption in their livelihood when there are rules in place for the months that it takes to get the process involved. So I think the 2 bylaws that you pick make the most sense. I mean, obviously littering, when we're able to fulfill those and track who's responsible for the littering, we can be punitive with that. And I think the question is how heavy do we want to be handed, because it is a concern. But then also, more respect, like you said, the parking has been an ongoing issue for weeks and months, and it's only going to get worse because we need as much as we can with our enforcement. And I think this tool makes it, again, the policies and the bylaws are the same. They're not changing. Our capacity to enforce them is not changing. But the last straw of where you get to with the actual fine allocation, it just avoids the courts. And with regards, I asked the question over the weekend about the hearing officer. So the hearing officer isn't a member of township staff. It's a third party individual that we're working on. I know other municipalities have contracted it out, but I believe it's someone with a legal background to interpret both sides of the course. So it's not someone in-house. I know it sounds as though went through a township appointment. It sounds like it's a township member of staff, but it's not. The intention is to pursue that as an exterior third party so that there isn't that sort of conflict of interest in the outcome. And I think I was glad to hear that because it's not necessarily intuitive in the report, but you mentioned that in the previous discussion about this. So I was happy to hear that. And I think it's from an efficiency standpoint, the paying of the courts is such a waste of money. And it's such a disruption for people that have the right to have the bylaws enforced that they want enforced. But we're stuck waiting and paying money to do so. And like I said, we need you not in court. We need you following up and fulfilling all the obligations associated with your office otherwise. So I appreciate that. Questions, members of council? Deputy Mayor Huntley?
Through you, Chair, to Kyle, just maybe a clarification. In your example, you're using about refuge, and you made a reference to, maybe the fine being $250, but the costs grow, and because of now if we use the AMP system, the costs come down, the fine could be $70 instead. Like I'm hoping we're not reducing the fines because our cost to administer them is lower. Just, can you clarify that for me?
Through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Huntley. Yeah, so there's several things with the fines. My example was just the waste of taxpayers' dollars in trying to enforce just that one alone. You have something that you think is as open and shut as it can be. You find a bag of garbage that has several pieces of someone's address and name on it. Could be 3 pieces. About 10 years ago, when I brought this to a JP, it was thrown out because right out of the gates, I can't prove that person put that in that ditch. That makes no sense to me. We would lay that charge now under AMPS. The intention for AMPS isn't to be punitive, so the fines are somewhat less than what we normally would have in our set fines that are through POA. So they're meant to be a compliance option, but they are set at council, so council can make those fines whatever they want. My example was when you take those to POA, they can get reduced. So even though you're laying a $250 set fine, whoever the justice that's looking at that can reduce that to $75 or throw it right out. So now you've been 4 trips possibly to the same place to try to get a $250 fine laid, and you could end up with nothing, or $75, which we might get a very small percentage of. Through the AMPS, it all comes back to us. But again, the enforcement process is still going to be education first, meeting with people, talking to them. With the garbage one, we still go out if we find somebody with their Amazon parcels or something, their names on there. We'll go up and talk to that person and give them time to go clean it up because we know it's them, and that has been effective. But really, there's no enforcement mechanism other than going through POA. And so they're almost calling our bluff, knowing where the courts are at, that'll take months and months to get a charge there. So some of them just don't bother, and we end up picking it up.
Other questions? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair back to Kyle, I have a whole lot of reservations about this concept, but I understand the garbage part. I pick up garbage every week, clean up the road allowance around my farm. I understand that the problem with parking is essentially the village of Millbrook. We don't seem to be confronting that at all. Right now, we've used up 5 or 6 spaces on the main street for outdoor patios in the busiest time for downtown. Parking has always been an issue with Millbrook, not enough of. We have property that we're gonna eliminate as parking potential when we tear up the road around by the old mill pond. All the directions that we're taking in physical actions don't seem to be helping the problem. And from my point of view, one of the selling features when I read this AMP idea was that we'll train people, we'll educate people. Well, you've already educated them and it's not working. If I'm hearing your conversation today right, that people are still doing the wrong things because you pretend that they know it's going to take a long time to fix. I don't know about that, but if the education is supposed to be a critical part of the AMP program, how come it's not working now?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, the education component comes in with individuals. That's the problem. So it's always going to be an issue, but the point of the education part is we're not going to change our process. So we go out right now, we go out and we lay that warning tag. In the best case scenario, the people call us and they say, I'm not even sure what parking contravention I was making an infraction of. Then we'll explain that whole bylaw to them. We'll give them a copy of the bylaw. A lot of times, like in the new subdivision over here, they'll find that out. A lot of people will go, okay, thanks for that. They'll give that to their neighbors so that they start to understand what are the parking requirements. Because it still is a small town, it's still rural, so we don't have signs all over the place. We're not trying to over restrict either. So that's the education part that I mean to talk to. But again, that's not going to go away. You don't just educate the public once and everybody knows. It usually happens with each infraction. So we're trying to help people learn what the rules are first before we go out there and start laying fines. The only change here is that instead of towing them, which is a huge cost to everybody involved and a long process, it's just a set fine. And they have mechanisms to dispute that if we were in the wrong, if there wasn't proper signage, or if we, if there was something we did wrong and they dispute it, they have the option to go to the screening review officer and they can plead their case there. That's just up the road from them if they're in Millbrook, whereas that would be a drive into Peterborough before, so.
Yeah, follow up, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair back to Kyle. So yeah, that kind of, it runs with what I'm thinking. If you're ticketing somebody the first time and then the second time in the village of Millbrook for overnight parking, leads me to think it's probably a local person. And if they don't want to adhere the first couple of warnings, then that substantial tow ticket should be a real wake up call for any individual as compared to this AMP program, what it might do. And it's laid out right in the writing that it's the potential's there to expand it to a bunch of other bylaws. The other thing I really have a problem with, because one of the things they're talking about, if you're not compliant and if we do fine you for whatever reason, right? They're going to slap it on your property taxes if you don't pay up. But a big chunk of what I'm learning when I go around and talk to people in Millbrook that are moving into the new subdivision just south of us here, there's a lot of rental people. Now, who do you jam? Do you jam it back to the address, the landowner, even though he's renting out the property to somebody else and he doesn't know about it till it's already maybe an implication for his mortgage renewal?
Through you, Mayor, to Council Byrne, I'll answer the last one first because I remember it. So yes, it will go to the property owner. That's the one challenge with AMPS is where do you put these fees? And if they're not the owner, they won't get the charge. But now the owner is aware of it and they'll probably contact the property owner. This happens with property standards as well. So that's nothing new to us. To your point about, is the person a local who is just not adhering to the bylaws and it's not going to work anyhow? You would think that would be the case, but we've had a number, all sorts of different variations with people who have large families and they now have 2 young drivers who are starting to take over vehicles. So they have too many vehicles to park them in their driveway and they're trying to start new jobs and they now work a night shift. So now this son just parked here and we gave it a warning tag. Maybe he didn't get that first one and that's why we always do the second, is because maybe the wind did blow it off. We get an ice storm or something. So for some reason, didn't get that first one. Second one, he comes home on a night shift, forgets, just tired, goes in and parks, heads in the house, comes out and his vehicle's towed. And he's a young, this is an exact example, obviously won't use any names, but comes out, he's a young person just starting out, just got a car, is trying to do the right thing. Yes, he forgot, parked there because he was tired, went inside, we towed his vehicle when he came out. Pretty punitive in that case, and there's a lot of examples, but to your point, yeah, you would normally think that it's just somebody who doesn't want to abide by the rules, but there's a lot of cases where people are trying and they just forget or something extraordinary happens and now they've got a towed vehicle, they don't know where it is, they can't make it to work. So that's why we have this process, a smaller charge, $25, whatever it's going to be. They're going to start getting the message and they still have that ability to go to the screen review officer.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Kyle. I think it's worthwhile. And I think I only just, I don't think it's a fair comment about the parking components that we're working on in the village. I mean, we're now working on a plan to create some parking capacity now that One Union isn't going to change hands. We've expanded parking at the old fire hall location for members of the public to park there. And we're also working on some sort of parking configuration for the downtown park that will accommodate the requirements there, and working with Nexicom and some of the issues that will create with well. So there's lots going on when it comes to addressing the parking, and there's some of the components with the land being developed what they are. I mean, I don't think it's not as though the businesses that are creating these patios don't need the increased revenue they get from those. Like, there's not many business owners that I talk to every week in Millbrook that are millionaires. Like, they are struggling, and the capacities and patios are a huge exacerbator for revenue for them when in the few months that they're available. And it is a compromise. I mean, yeah, it's a compromise for everyone that there's a little less parking, but I mean, we want businesses to be able to sustain themselves in the village of Millbrook. And without this, I don't think they would. And that's been communicated to me quite clearly, quite often. So there's no perfect solution to the parking riddle. Like, we can't create more capacity in a historical village that, you know, was designed when we were still driving horses. So, I mean, we are restricted in what we can do. But again, I think it comes back to, we're always going to have bylaws. They're always going to need enforcement. The way we're enforcing them now, when it gets to the worst case scenario about the enforcement, is the least efficient part of the entire process. It's the least efficient for those that are having their rights infringed upon, and it's not really efficient for those that are that are doing the violations. Like you said, the towing is a great example. I think everyone would rather pay $25 to $50 rather than have their car towed for any standpoint. But we will never be able to do that without the adoption of this system, which we've already created in the background. We just don't have the authority to enforce it yet. So we already have the system. It's already here and it's already available. The question really is, do we want these two bylaws to be enforced through this mechanism? Or are there other bylaws we would prefer to be enforced through this mechanism? Because it's not going anywhere and neither are bylaws. So it really becomes a matter of, you want to, and again, to your point, this is just a trial run on a few to start. And there's no changing of capacity. This will actually free up Kyle's capacity to do the other components of his job that are far more important than the, you know, some of these, depending on the instance. I don't want to trivialize bylaw enforcement with other things you're doing, but the fact of the matter is, we need your time spent as efficiently as possible, and this helps do that. About the, like I said, the legal process being what it is and the challenges being what they are. But we have the system, we paid for it to be there. So now it's just a matter of what we're going to enforce with it. So I think that the two initial recommendations that you have are a good starting point, but if we wanted to just try parking, we could just try parking, which I think makes the most sense, like you said. And if we don't want to do it for waste, we can do a trial run for the year and get a report back from Kyle for the year about the parking enforcement. If it's been helpful, how it's been received by people actually not getting their vehicles towed. I think you'll probably get more of a pop, because I've had those calls too, for those a few instances where I won't name the names either, because I'm sure I've got the calls that Kyle's got the calls, and that's how the calls work, and that's fine. But I don't know the lot where they're towed to either. So it becomes a bit of a, I wish I could help them, but I think they can interpret the fine and understanding and communications. And when it comes to the Highland South, we've also worked with the proponent and the developer about creating an overnight lot there, which is accessible, and that we have communicated to residents for that purpose. So we've actually created an option for them that they, and I don't know if it's been took as much as we want, but again, that's another part of that. When you have those enforcement issues and instances, it allows you to also let them know about that opportunity as well, because I'm sure it's not widely publicized because it is private property that I'm sure it's an accommodation on the interim for this overnight capacity issue that we're having. So I appreciate that. Councilor Brent. Okay, Deputy Mayor, go for it.
But through you, Chair, I think this system needs to be put in place. I mean, we have struggled with, you know, parking and towing and like, as you said, like with refuge, you know, trying to track that down. I mean, I mean, we're not talking a monumental change and shift. It is a freeing up of time. It's a way of discouraging such things. I think our municipality on a whole has been extremely lenient in parking over the decades compared to pretty much anywhere else you go. You're always playing dodge the parking ticket guy, you know, and I hope we never get there. And I don't think we ever will. I think this is just a tool that we can have in our back pocket, you know, and I think these are the perfect two places to start, you know, refuge, obviously, and parking, kind of the obvious starting points. Who knows whether we ever expand this or not, or whether it's required to expand it. But I think this is the right place and the right time.
Councilor Burke.
Through the chair, one other thing that made me think, it's mentioned in here that other places are doing it, and I've been sold that story before when it turned out there wasn't that many and we're kind of guinea pigs. But I can get Trent Lakes and that area because their population probably comes close to double or triple in the summer months because they're all vacation properties on the lake. We don't have that change of population to that extent, I don't think at all. So I really don't know if it's comparing apples to oranges type of, when you say that those couple of communities are trying this.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. Yeah, you're never going to have a direct comparison, but the comparing part that is the same is the POA process, and it's not working. So when we get to, every municipality is different, like Deputy Mayor said, we have been lenient. We tend to be a lenient bylaw enforcement because we're education first. But the process at the end is not efficient, and we're trying to make it efficient. There are many areas that are utilizing this now for many different bylaws too. There's some that are using them for a lot more bylaws, but property standards is pretty much the same across the board. Refuse and disposal of snow, that's what the one bylaw is, that's pretty straightforward across the board too with most municipalities. So really, you may have population differences, but the enforcement at the end of the day of each of those bylaws, at the end of it, to actually lay a fine is the same. So it is as close as you're going to get to apples then.
Yeah, Council Brand?
Through the chair, on page 98, 7.7 of the process here in the bylaws, you referred to how, if I read the bylaw correctly, we're going to create a manager for this program. The manager sounds like it's going to have more authority than council. They'll be able to do changes as well, maybe prior to, on just what I'm reading. Okay. All right, that's fine. I'm looking for clarity, but it refers in that I think it's 7.13 and 7 that it couldn't be challenged. Whatever we do here at this process, the person would never have the ability, even if they accepted paying it up front and didn't know that maybe they didn't do anything wrong, that maybe there was a mistake on our part as a township, they have no recourse. They don't have any process allowed to go back to the court process. And I witnessed that here a year or so ago when we were going to take somebody to court. And when they came to in front of council, it was decided that, yeah, maybe that process wasn't done properly. So what I'm worried about, we instrument this thing, and then somewhere down the road, a person that lives in the township doesn't have any recourse. There doesn't seem to be any mechanism that I can really, other than this appeal process, it's supposed to be a third party who's going to be allowed to get influence or instructions or whatever from staff. I worry that it's going to impact the public and not have that clarity of process that the judicial system is supposed to offer.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. And that's why when you raised that previously, that's why I said it is a valid point, but there is two mechanisms of appeal here. Which prior to that, you go to a judge and they make the ruling there. So here you go to a screening review officer first. That would be an in-house staff person. That's the person who is in-house, who reviews the file if you are appealing, to make sure that we've done it all right. That's the first step. If they don't like the judgment by that screening officer, that is when it goes to a third-party hearing officer who does have certain policies and stuff in place and who have a legal background and should not be influenced by staff, only as us being one of the parties that will submit what our evidence was that there was a proof of a bylaw contravention. That person is going to make that third judgment. So there is two more steps for judgment. Is it a perfect process? We'd like to trial it for a year to find out at least. And again, if this isn't working efficiently for staff, it's not a process that we're going to want to use either. It looks to me like it is going to be efficient. So that's why we're asking for approval of the bylaws.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kyle. Like I said, do you want to maybe speak to sort of I think with certain municipalities, there's been a bit of a technological delay in them being able to implement this. Can you maybe talk a bit about sort of the background in that process about, sort of like what we've done to date? Because like I said, the attached report has already been adopted by council. So I mean, that's where, we're moving forward in that regard. We've established the ability to do this. So, I mean, it seems as though there might be some ambiguity about the enforcement and how that works, which is, obviously we can't answer all those questions today, but maybe it sounds as though from certain members of council, and we obviously don't have one member of council here today, that there's some ambiguity about how the enforcement works and what the efficiencies are. So I don't know, at this point, I'm wondering, is it worth deferring the report so that council can ask questions and maybe set up a time with you to have a consideration and get those questions answered? Or, I mean, like, because, I was under the impression, like, we've already supported the AMP program as in the previous report. So we're moving forward in that regard. This is just picking which enforcement mechanism or what bylaws are going to be the first to be enforced on. So like, council's, bound by the decision to move forward in that regard with the AMP program. This is deciding which bylaws are going to be the first in. So we're really just deciding which bylaws are going in. So I think that's some of the ambiguity that I think is also leading to some misinterpretation of the report itself. So maybe you want to speak to that, and then we can go to council for consideration about that.
Through you, Mayor, to council. No, it was brought back it was brought forward in February just for council to start to digest it, because it is a lot. Nothing was really passed at that time. This is to bring the whole system forward. Which is, we reduced the amount of bylaws so that we could trial it ourselves. There's not, I'm okay with deferring it. There's not much more to really discuss. It is like the technological part. Some municipalities have the ticketing process itself. You can make your own tickets. You can buy the old carbon copies. There's several ways you can do that, but it's pretty straightforward. It's really, like you've said, just that very last step of going to POA or trying this in-house. If it works well in-house, it's going to be much more efficient and better for the residents, in my opinion. If not, we're still stuck with our current POA court situation, which is not efficient, which we're at the mercy of the courts for even getting in there. That being said, there's not much more to the program. It is a lot. It is a big change. And just to address Councillor Burns' other concern about the manager having the ability to do that, no, council designates bylaw. We cannot add bylaws to these schedules. It has to go back to council. Council can quash this bylaw at any time. Council has to go to council for any changes to any of the fees. So all that is a council approval. The manager is just the one who's doing the day-to-day operations to make sure that we're adhering to the bylaw.
Yeah, so not a separate position. The manager is the bylaw officer, and it's ipso facto, right? Yeah. Fair enough. Ms. Hurley, did you want to speak?
Through you, Chair, to council, I think you answered the question. We're not hiring a new staff person for this position. It is currently Kyle's position. He is the manager of that. So we're not hiring another Kyle at this time. The other part to that is Kyle already answered it. Any changes would come back. A bylaw has to go back before council. It's not an administrative. Administrative would be if, administrative change or going to the screening officer and they alluded to making some changes based on the conversation they had with that potential ratepayer. But it's not hiring new people. The only person that is recommended to be hired here is the hearing officer.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Burke.
Through the chair. So if I'm clear on this, then we already have the manager established, going to be Kyle, but we still have two other officers in this process. So other staff are going to be assigned those positions, and that the screening officer, somebody different. Anyways, there's a couple of different titles that'll have to be assigned to somebody, right? And then the third party referee at the end of it all, he'll be on a contract basis, not a full-time employee. Is that my guess?
Through you, Mayor, to Council Byrne, that's correct. So there will be the screening review officer will be an internal person, not hiring any more staff for that. That'll be the first step. That third party will be a hearing officer on retainer. So they typically, for most all the other municipalities using this, they're a pay per. So unless you get an appeal, you don't pay anything. If you do get an appeal, they have a fee for that.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Kyle. Any questions about the report? I mean, like I said, the report is fairly straightforward. There's not many ways you can do it. I'm not sure if council would like to, I think we need to have a discussion with regards to the motion. I mean, if there's additional questions, we can defer the consideration of the report. If there isn't, we could entertain a motion counter to what's been presented, but we're really just instituting these two. I'd be happy to include language around the fact that it's only it's a 1-year trial for the inclusion of these two, and then the council can consider the outcome and that can report back so that there's no binding commitment to utilizing it any further. And I think that might be all well intentioned to let us know what the implications are. Do people actually appreciate it or don't they? And how often are we utilizing it? To me, a 1-year trial makes sense if certain people with doubts have concerns. I mean, like I said, I'm tired of paying the POA for only getting a share of the revenue back and the amount of time and waste for everyone for basic, very fundamental bylaws. And like you said, for all the reasons you've already outlined. So, but posing that to council without making a motion, just wanted to have that conversation. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to the mayor, I would be more agreeable to that concept, that this doesn't become binding, that we do maybe make an experiment on the issue. And if we curtail it to just these two infractions, and if there is some kind of status that can be reported back, tangible evidence to look at, I'd be more in favor of something along that idea.
Okay, so Kyle, is there any issues with instituting sort of a framework of a 1-year trial and then getting you to come back after the term of that year for a fulsome report about the totality of the uptake, and if there's any ability to get public input or comments or track them as you're, conducting your work, then we can have that to also be from the basis of a report. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Or is there anything we don't know that would be a problem for? Let's say it that way.
Through you, Mayor, to council, I think it's a great idea as long as the clerk doesn't have an issue with the trial bylaw again. I don't think she does. Yeah, I think that seems like a very transparent way, and anything that we'll start working on what we can obtain for stats of any of the bylaws, any of the contraventions that go through here and what the outcomes of them were, we can report on that in 1 year.
I guess the one thing that I'm just going through all of the things that might impact this as we go through. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the fines are established in that user fee bylaw, and that usually comes in the fall. Am I wrong on that? I just don't want to, if that's coming out in the spring, as we should almost have a kind of a moratorium on the fines while we're in this trial, or if that can even be incorporated into the report when that comes up, to just say we're not binding the previous council, but that the previous council requested that the fines for these two bylaws be held firm for the term of the trial period. Because like I said, we don't know who's going to run and who's going to win, and what we want is sort of maintain the sanctity of the trial period for just these two bylaws, because you don't want to have it and then jack, if the next council wants to jack their rates, it might kind of taint the water when it comes to the enforcement of the AMP program with these two bylaws. So I think staff can take that comment, or does that need to be enshrined in the motion, or is that I just want to make sure that it seems like we're getting to a motion for a trial period, but is that interpretable? Spoke.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to all of council. Every year, yes, you're right. We do that in the fall, and we bring that forward for council to take a look at with our consolidated user fees. We always have to have a report first for anything brand new within the year. So this is the right process. And each year, the manager looks at the program and then chooses whether or not they want to bring forward to council an increase because costs have gone up, or to maintain the same. It's not a blanket across the board percentage increase. So Kyle would then review that in the fall, and he would propose whether or not there should be an increase or not. So there's absolutely no requirement that there's some level of increase that has to happen at the end of the year by any means.
It was a stretch, but I was like, again, when you get these layers of the onion, it gets, you don't want to, have a mistaken outcome. But anyways, I think we're there. I think it makes sense for the 1-year trial. So I guess the recommendation would be that council approve the administrative penalty system bylaw number 2026-28 and screening and hearing officer bylaw number 2026-29. But I want to incorporate or add the language about for a 1-year trial period for the implementation thereof to report it back to council at a later date. Does that work for you, Cindy? I'm dancing a lot here, but I think that makes sense. So Councilor Byrne, does that appease so that we really moving? Oh, sorry, Kyle. Sorry. Again, I can't see over the lectern here. I'm not telling up here.
Come on. Through Mayor to council, I think it would be a good idea to just put in there some verbiage around the fines being set for the year. I think that would give you a bit more comfortability knowing that it's not going to be changed at user fee. Then I know it's set as is. We go through the next term. Everybody knows these are the fees no matter what until that trial period ends.
So the addition would be, so the second part of the recommendation would be, and that the bylaws being enforced under the AMP program be held firm for the full term of the 1-year trial. Right? Cindy?
Through Mayor Graham to yourself, rest of council and Kyle and Kimberly. I would imagine if we're going to make these amendments, these bylaws are going to have to come back to council anyways. So why don't we just say come in effect from one year from date of passing today? And then we can bring those back if we're not going to line it with the user fee and charges bylaw. I think that's an easier way to do it. And we can scope that language. We'll amend the bylaw before we have you sign it. And then we can work with the clerical component of that if staff agree and council agrees.
Okay, but the intentions are clear, and so those bylaws will come back at a later date with the appropriate language to reflect the 1-year trial and the holding of the fines. Okay. Moving to seconder, oh, sorry, Ms. Page.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to the rest of council, we can bring that bylaw back to the next meeting if you would like, just all cleaned up and sign it at that second meeting. That my little clerk card feels better about that. Okay.
We always appreciate timelines. I think that's all better for everyone so that we understand it. Correct, understood. All right, everyone's clear as mud. We have to understand the 1-year trial, et cetera, et cetera. We got a mover from the recommendation by Councilor Byrne. I'll second it. All in favor with regards to the recommendations? That is approved. All right, good discussion, everyone. And thanks, Kyle, for all the hard work on this. And we'll look forward to that future report. And hopefully it all goes well and the efficiencies are what we hope they are. The next is 11.5 building planning 2026-15 official plan and zoning bylaw amendments 963 County Road 10. This is Miss Ellis.
Mayor Graham, members of council, planning report 2026-15 is before you today with 3 recommendations. Firstly, that council approve bylaw number 2026-33 to adopt official plan amendment number 20 to the Township of Cavan Monaghan official plan. Secondly, that council authorize the submission of the adopted official plan amendment to Peterborough County for review and approval. And finally, that bylaw number 2026-34 be approved to rezone the subject lands to implement the policies of official plan amendment number 20. The official plan and zoning bylaw amendments being spoken to in this report pertain to an existing lot of record located at 963 County Road 10 in part of Lot 13, Concession 6, Cavan. So it's the lands directly across the road on the east side of County Road 10. These amendments are required to permit the consideration of a mixed-use plan of subdivision. The plan includes 159 lots for single detached residential units, 27 townhouse blocks containing 148 townhouse units, and 2 medium density blocks containing 176 apartment units. In total, there will be 483 residential units. In this plan, there's also 2 community commercial blocks, 1 institutional block, which is the township's water reservoir, 2 natural heritage system blocks, 1 stormwater management block, 1 parkland block, and 1 future residential block. So this, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were the subject of a public meeting back in December of 2025. At that time, township staff prepared a presentation outlining the purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. We also spoke briefly to the plan of subdivision application currently being processed by Peterborough County. Through that circulation of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments and the plan of subdivision, there were a number of comments received from ministries, agencies, and Peterborough County's peer review consultants. To address those comments, the applicant did provide updated information related to hydrogeological and geotechnical assessment, the phase 1 environmental assessment, the functional servicing study, the traffic impact study, the draft plan of subdivision, erosion hazard assessment, and fluvial geomorphic assessment. That information has all been reviewed by Peterborough County's peer review consultant, the agencies that we deal with directly, including Autonomy Conservation, township staff, and Peterborough County staff. Based on the comments received and the new technical information, changes have been made to the draft official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. Primarily, the changes include the institutional designation and zone category being added to the draft documents to recognize the location of the new municipal water storage facility. Secondly, the natural core area is being changed to natural linkage area in the official plan amendment, just because it was so small and unreadable, and it just makes a smoother transition. The urban residential 2 exception X zone was replaced with the urban residential 3 exception 5 and the urban residential 4 exception 5 zones. And lastly, special regulations for loading space requirements and drive-through establishments have been included in the community commercial exception zone. So with the proposed official plan amendment, we will be changing land use designations from the urban employment to community commercial, residential, parks and open space, institutional and natural linkage area, from the community commercial designation to residential, from natural linkage to residential and community commercial, and from natural core to natural linkage. Mark, if you could go to Schedule 1, so the official plan amendments. Keep going. It'll be the one with the plan of subdivision underneath. Oh, right there. That one right there. So the map before you on the screen shows the proposed designations. So the pink color is the commercial, and then you're going to see a little kind of purpley pink color, which will be the institutional designation. The yellow is residential. The light green is the parks and open space, and then the darker, more limey green is the natural linkage area. So with this map, you can see the proposed designations. We've overlaid it on top of the draft plan of subdivision, so you can see what designation actually applies to what portion of the property. If you could flip, Mark, to the next map, the Schedule 1 for the zoning bylaw amendment. So this is Schedule 1 to the zoning bylaw amendment. You can see it looks very similar to the official plan amendment. The zoning bylaw amendment before you today has been drafted to reflect the format and regulations of both the minister's zoning order that applies to a portion of the property and the township zoning bylaw number 2018-58 as amended. New exception zones are being introduced for the commercial and residential land uses. Standard zones are being used for the institutional block, the park block, the stormwater management block, and the natural heritage blocks. The residential exception zones will include a holding provision that prohibits new development until the township confirms adequate sanitary and water servicing capacity for the development. The holding provision does permit the removal of the holding provision in phases. In the urban residential 3 exception 5 holding 14 zone, single detached and semi-detached dwellings will be added as permitted uses. There are special lot area, lot frontage, front yard, interior side yard, and lot coverage regulations. These regulations are similar to what was applied in the minister's zoning order. Multiple dwellings, long-term care facilities, and retirement homes will be permitted in the urban residential 4 exception 5 holding 14 zone. Special regulations for the front yard, interior side yard, exterior side yard, rear yard, lot coverage, building height, loading spaces, and parking spaces are being applied. The setback requirements from the county road will not apply. Those special setbacks from the county road are not being applied because of the proposed works on County Road 10. In the community commercial exception 2 zone, art galleries, artisan studios, building supply stores, financial institutions, all of the uses permitted in the minister's zoning order will be permitted in the C5-2 zone. Special regulations for lot area, front yard, interior and exterior side yard, rear yard, building height, floor area, loading spaces, driveway treatments, and drive-throughs are proposed. Again, the setback requirements from the county road will not apply. So with this application, we did provide notice in December for the public meeting as per the requirements of the Planning Act. And we did not get any public comment at that time or since then. With the additional information provided by the applicant, we have received comments from Autonomy Conservation, and they have confirmed that they are okay with the information provided. As I've indicated, the peer review consultants for Peterborough County have signed off on the information. Our own township departments have signed off for the most part. The fire chief has indicated, as he does, that the maximum 4-story height limit is an issue in terms of fire protection, but that 4-story height limit matches what we have approved in Tower Hill North what is happening in CSU, what is happening in Vargas South. So this permission is similar to what we have provided for other properties within the area. And lastly, clearance from the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism was required for the northern portion of the site. By letter dated February 25th, 2026, the ministry confirmed that the fieldwork and reporting for the archaeological assessment is consistent with the ministry standards and guidelines, and the report has been entered into the Ontario Public Register for archaeological reports. So based on the information that we've received, together with working through this with the applicant's agent, the township staff are satisfied that the applications are consistent with the PPS and conform to Peterborough County's official plan and the township's official plan. And we are recommending approval of the bylaws.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. It's been before us a number of different times in a number of different capacities, and this is getting near, if not to sort of the final strokes of the pens for, we have one more component for consideration, and then we're there. But questions, members of council with regards to the report. Council Brown.
Through the chair to Karen, you just touched on it right near the end. On page 115 of my report, it talked about that clearance from the Ministry of Civil. Is that because of the graveyard? Is that what they're talking about, the northern portion of that property, or why is that in there?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council. So archaeological assessments are required for development applications these days. So previously we did have an archaeological assessment for the southern portion of the property. The northern portion was done separately and we were waiting for that clearance. So that's why it's mentioned specifically. The southern portion of the property had already been cleared.
Follow.
Through the chair, no, something different. It mentions in here about the possibility of the use of mobile food trucks and whatever in this area, and the possibility of plural drive-throughs. I'm just wondering what we're looking at for that, the need for all that.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, members of council. So in the commercial component of the property, the zoning will permit a variety of uses, and drive-throughs are part of those uses. So there will be site plan approval required as part of the processing to allow commercial development of the site. So we will be looking at the location of those drive-throughs and ensuring that they meet the regulations imposed by the zoning bylaw amendment proposed today and the standard regulations in the township zoning bylaw. So we do have, we've just received the second submission for the site plan application. There are a number of drive-throughs proposed and they will be evaluated based on the regulations before us, but they are permitted uses and our zoning bylaw does currently have regulations for drive-throughs. And it's what the people want.
Well, what some do and some don't, but regardless, it's an entitlement under the existing framework. So, I mean, it is what it is, but I think this council and other councils have made it clear about the disruptions and concerns with those types of enterprises. And I know the developers heard us on those and is going to take those considerations and make the best accommodations possible. Other questions with regards to the report? If not, we'll wait for that one last planning matter to come forward and go from there. So there are three recommendations in the report that we approve the bylaw number 2026-32 to adopt the official plan amendment number 20 to the Township of Kapamonik official plan. The council authorized the submission of the adopted official plan amendment to Peterborough County for review and approval. And that bylaw number 2026-34 be approved to rezone the subject lands to implement the policies of the official plan amendment number 20. Looking for a mover and a seconder for those three recommendations. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by I'll be the seconder. All in favor of the recommendations, that is approved. Thank you very much, Ms. Ellis, for the report. Lastly, Mr. Hancock, you are up, and it wouldn't be a meeting without Wayne having something to say. So report Public Works 2026-9 Needlers Lane Water Main Replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, Public Works Report 2026-09. Before you is four recommendations. Number one, that council approve the water main replacement on Needlers Lane to BN Construction Limited in the pre-tax amount of $145,136.81. After 20% contingency of $29,027.36 and net municipal HST of $3,065.29. The net total approval request is $177,229.46. And recommendation number 2, that council approve the contract administration of the water main replacement on Needler's Lane to Valdor Engineering Incorporated in the pre-tax amount of $15,937.60 after a 20% contingency of $3,187.52 and a net municipal HST of $336.60. The net total approval request for contract administration is $19,461.72. And recommendation number 3 is that council approve advancing the Needler's Lane Water Main and Roadway Replacement Project to 2026, and that the construction work in the amount of $196,691.18 as outlined in this report be approved. And number 4, that funding for the Needler's Lane Water Main Project be approved through pre-allocation of $132,198 from the 2027 OSIF grant for roads and $384,214 from existing water and wastewater reserves for water mains, and that any surplus funds remaining at the year end be carried forward into the 2027 budget under the 5-year water main and roads capital program. The report PW 2025-16 is attached. And just as a comment on this report, this project has been brought forward to 2026 to coincide with the downtown park revitalization. And it is driven in part by the grant applications and approval dates of that park construction. We also foresee some significant cost savings in that the roadway restoration for Needler's Lane, if the park's plans do go ahead, is not going to be required. It will be, for the most part, a walkway path. And that we are proposing the water main crossing under Baxter Creek. It's being incorporated in this work. And we're looking at, since it's concrete encased, we're looking at relining that, which again is a significant cost saving overall in our program. So this project is just under 200,000, and our capital request originally was just over 500,000. So the report is before you, Mr. Mayor and council, for any questions.
So just to summarize, Wayne, so this is trying to expedite the finish of the connection for wastewater and water servicing for the purpose of having the bathroom facilities in the park. To summarize it in so much, they're already doing the work with regards to some of the other in the area with regards to the water main replacements, et cetera. And so we're just escalating up this element of the project so that it doesn't hold up the park construction or the functionality of the bathroom at the park as well. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, first of all, we've utilized the unit prices, as we refer to them, from being construction in this job, and they have provided this updated estimate, and it is to use a contract that's already working in Millbrook to complete this work, and it is to coincide and allow for the completion of the park within the timelines that are required under the grant.
Ms. Pope, is there any ability, and I should have mentioned this earlier, so I apologize, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but with regards to the utilization of funds from the water wastewater reserve, is that it's a significant 384,000 from the reserve. I just wondered if you could speak to, what amount of the reserve that equates to, or what disruption or your fiscal analysis of utilizing that, and the fact that it's a viable source, or is it something theoretically we should go back to the AMP and reduce the AMP further to fund? I just want to know the implications of utilizing that from the reserve, but seeing as it's water infrastructure, it's a part of that infrastructure that's born in that separate accounting system, right? So I just wanted to get an understanding of how that implication plays out.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to all of council. At this point in time, based on the estimates where we expect to receive funds this year, it doesn't look like it's a problem. But of course, if it was, we'd bring it back to council. And that's when I'd propose to go over to the municipal side with the tax base and look for additional funding to help carry it forward. But at this time, it doesn't look like we need to do that as of yet. But again, we have to just watch the program move forward and see where we get to and if there's any rollovers into next year or not.
Yeah, and the intention, like, I know we've seen a few things coming in, but it doesn't pertain to the water, wastewater necessarily so much, but yeah, but from the roadworks component, we've had a few savings with regards to the cost estimates that for some of the works to be done. So as it alludes to in the report, the assumption is that we're going to reduce whatever from the road standpoint, because that's within the municipal wide budget. That the intention is to use any surplus funds to offset the cost of this additional project. Is that correct?
Yes, first of all, Mr. Mayor, I mean, we have a separated water main replacement, which is water, wastewater, and of course, we have the roadworks, and those are two separate components. So the intent here is that we are reducing the overall cost, but certainly the roadworks will be reduced, which is your tax part of the dollars.
Okay, thanks for those clarifications. Questions, members of council, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Wayne, does any of this tie in, like we mentioned the park idea, and there's gonna be an outdoor facility for washrooms and whatever? Is that gonna tie into this, and is there any way to utilize the money that was the scope change from the, I don't know, there should be somewhere over $500,000 left of that money that was granted for the park to offset any of this, or is it gonna be utilized to tie into that facility wherever it ends up?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Byrne, first of all, I think you're talking about the servicing. There's an outdoor washroom facility and I should say not an outdoor, but I'd say a washroom facility that's being proposed on the site. And there is, a couple of services that are being provided. Those are included in the park budget presently. We will have the contractor incorporate those. But I'm not sure at this point that there's any savings that can be transferred one way or the other. We're working with the dollars and prices that we have before us.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wayne. I know we're at the task force level, just to provide that context, we're looking at the various options for the facility itself. I think the RFP is out. I think it's closed now if it wasn't extended further, but we were happy to see that. It's amazing how much you can spend on a washroom, and some municipalities have spent $500,000 on a washroom only to hate it within a year. So it is quite an eye-opening to think of how simple a facility it is. It can really get out of hand. So thankfully, the task force has worked through some of those conversations and eliminated some of the higher end ones. And we believe that at least for that element of the park, we have a lot of lower cost options, but it still requires the servicing, as you mentioned, because obviously it's a very environmentally sensitive area. So we have to be as cautious as we can with regards to that. So thanks for that. Other questions? Seeing none, Wayne already expertly read all 4 recommendations, so if you don't mind, I'll save mine for the bylaws. So the 4 recommendations are before us in the report. Does anyone have any questions about any of the recommendations? If not, we'll look for a mover and a seconder for those recommendations in the report. Moved by Councillor Edgerton, second by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, Mr. Hancock, for that report. Next, council report, or so the CAO report and capital status, Ms. Hurley.
Good afternoon. The report and capital status report is before you. Just to give you a couple updates, I just wanted to bring your attention to the bottom one, which is the aspect for a Compass and a follow-up regarding a shed at OMS. We do and have a shed that's already available. It's already built at OMS. And when we reviewed it with Compass and early on, it's going to be sufficient and there's no requirement to build a new shed. So we found a solution. We didn't realize that there was hardly anything in the existing shed and it was in really great condition. So with the tour, I think we've appeased everyone and I think everyone's very pleased about that. So just wanted to give you a little update on that. What's not identified here is the parking report. I know, Mayor, you mentioned about the parking report. We will be coming back in June regarding that as well. And we will certainly add that to this list as well. Thank you.
Ms. Hurley, any questions? If not, we'll take a mover and a seconder. Question, Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair to that, So as far as 3 and 5 Center Street, we've been looking at planning for a long time in the reports, but nothing really tangible for what was ever planned. It was a property that the township wanted to buy for a long, long time prior to buying it. And now we decided to sell it. I just wonder, all that planning, what are we actually thinking about going forward?
I'm not really sure what you mean by planning. The planning was to purchase it. The issue was with the easement for the potential connection through at the back with regards to traffic, but there's no municipal plans that have ever been developed beyond that. We were talking about, we changed some of the boundaries of the different properties for the easement accommodation, but the intention's been to list the properties and they are listed. That's it. Okay. Any other questions? Now take a mover and a seconder for the record and capital status report. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Any committee verbal reports from any committee meetings? Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, I'd just like to announce that our accessibility committee has a survey out that you can attempt to complete for us. Have good turnout so far on the online survey portion, but you can also do a hard copy at either one of the 2 libraries or even up here at the township office at any point in time to give us a little better idea on how you'd like to hear our communications moving forward. And I just want to wish the Millbrook Fair good luck.
Other committee reports? I'll speak for Deputy Mayor. Unfortunately, there was a conflict, so I appreciate it and just wanted to thank the Deputy Mayor for stepping up and taking the county recognition awards and representing us so I could attend the 100th anniversary Historical Society event at the Legion. It was really interesting. I was obviously at that one, so I can't speak to the award winners, but I was happy to see a lot of local people or a few local people being recognized by the county. That was excellent. And congratulations to all those receiving recognition. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the Historical Society as well as members of the Legion for hosting a really interesting night. And in addition, so it's the 100th century, I'm going to use that word wrong anyways, but there's a term for the Century Award with regards to the anniversary of all the Legions in Canada that's occurring. And that was sort of the catalyst for the Historical Society doing a historical explanation of or a historical deep dive in some of the history surrounding the Legion in Millbrook. So that was great. And they're also, the supplementary event is going to be July 18th. There's going to be a barbecue. That's sort of the summer celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Legions across Canada. So hope to see everyone down there. It'll be a great event. And that's all the comments I have, but Deputy Mayor has one.
Thank you, Chair. Well, since you brought up the community awards, I should probably mention them. So it was my honor to attend and recognize 4 different groups and individuals within the township that are doing amazing things and across all of Peterborough County. In fact, there was a number of award winners that were just blow my mind. What people are accomplishing within this county. Within our own township, we had Josh Helm for the Foodland that was recognized for business excellence. We had Friendship Force for their amazing work that they do with people, adults with disabilities. Bennett Hoare was a young student that was represented. He's a James Strath student who is an outstanding student there. And finally, Hannah Shad, who is an amazing volleyball player with international recognition, was awarded from our township. So it was fantastic evening.
We're all a little slow on the trigger today. I'm going to move her in a seconder for those committee reports. Moved by Councillor Byrne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? Those are approved. There is no general business. There is no correspondence for information. There is no correspondence for action. So I will move to the bylaws. That bylaw number 2026-25 being a bylaw to provide for the adoption of the levy and provide to the adoption of the tax rates to further provide for penalty and interest and default payment thereof of 2026, and bylaw number 2026-26 being a bylaw to provide for the adoption of special services levy, and bylaw number 2026-27 being a bylaw to provide for the levy and collection of special charges for the year 2025 in respect of the business improvement area. And bylaw number 2026-30 zoning bylaw amendment for 143 Elmdale, and bylaw number 2026-31 zoning bylaw amendment for 1910 County Road 10, and bylaw number 2026-32 32, zoning bylaw Cathcart Crescent, and bylaw number 2026-33, official plan amendment, number 20, Fallis North subdivision, 963 County Road 10, and bylaw number 2026-34, zoning bylaw amendment, 963 County Road 10, be read a first, second, third time and passed this 19th day of May, signed by the clerk and the mayor and the clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto. A lot of numbers. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? Those bylaws are approved. There is no unfinished business. There are no notices of motion. The confirming bylaw, that bylaw number 2026-35 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held May 19th, 2026, be read a first, second, and third time and passed this 19th day of May, signed by the mayor and the clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley and seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. Lastly, a motion to adjourn today's meeting moved by Councillor Edgerton and Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. There's a number of upcoming events and meetings. The Cabot Public Library Board meeting is tonight at 7 p.m. The Millwood Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting is Monday, May 25th. The next regular council meeting is Monday, June 1st. June already. There you go, at 1 p.m. in the chamber. And the subsequent regular council meeting is Monday, June 22nd at 1 p.m. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you in the township. Take care.